All right, we're good.
All right. Everybody's ready? Wait, where's Lorraine and Matt?
I'm here.
Oh, I don't see you.
I am coming.
All right, good. Now we're good. All right, very good. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Ridgewood Village Council Public Workshop, April 28th, 2021. The time is 7:31 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a posting on the bulletin board of Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled. Same is provided by law of a schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Due to the fact that we continue to meet through a remote meeting format, there are some required announcements to make. Deputy Mayor Seaton.
Thank you, Mayor. All participants are muted during this meeting. Anyone wishing to make comments may do so during comments from the public and during the public hearings on any ordinances by dialing *9 on your phones to raise your hand, and then once you're recognized, dialing *6 on your phones to unmute, or by raising your hand icon if you are on your computer. You must state your name and address for the record. Members of the public may also submit written comments to us for any future remote meetings by either email to Donna Jackson, Deputy Village Clerk at djackson@ridgewoodnj.net with the subject line "Comments for Village Council Meeting," or written letter to Donna Jackson, Deputy Village Clerk. Written comments must be received by 4 p.m. on the day before the remote meeting in order to be read into the record during the meeting. All written comments must adhere to the time limits already set by ordinance. Members of the public commenting during a remote meeting shall not act in any manner to disrupt the meeting. If anyone becomes disruptive during the meeting, they will be muted. If time permits, the disruptive individual shall be allowed to speak after all other members of the public are provided an opportunity to comment. Any continued disruption may result in a member being prevented from speaking during the remainder of this meeting. Disruptive conduct includes, but is not limited to, shouting, interruptions, and the use of profanity.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Roll call.
Councilwoman Perrin,
Here.
Councilwoman Reynolds,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Seaton,
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh,
Here.
Mayor Knudsen.
Here, please join us for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join us in a moment of silence for our men and women serving our nation, our first responders, and for all those who suffer at the hands of hate crimes. Okay, thank you. We'll take public comments not to exceed 3 minutes per person for a total of 40 minutes. And I do believe we might have a write-in as well, right?
We have 4 letters, Mayor.
Okay. All right, let's go to the phone line first.
All right, first person is Eleanor Gruber. Please unmute.
Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Ellie Gruber, 229 South Irving. Just 3 things, if I might. The first is I hope, I don't see it on the agenda tonight. I believe it's next time you have a meeting. I hope you will reconsider suspending the open space tax. I think you know my feelings about this. I feel it's a foolish economy. That's number 1. Number 2, I looked on the agenda and one of your policy items is something about balloons in the downtown. And I hope that you're not considering having balloons anywhere near the downtown. Years ago, the schools stopped their balloon launches, which were a popular thing, because the balloons were landing in the waterways. And every green town knows that you shouldn't have balloon in downtown. People buy them in the store. That drives me crazy. But they do get away. They float away, and we have so much water around us. I really think there's got to be another way. If your purpose was to, show downtown, it's a great looking downtown without the balloons. But the third thing is, there are 2 bills in the New Jersey legislature right now referring to the Green Amendment in New Jersey. And many towns are signing municipal resolutions supporting the Green Amendment just our rights to clean water, clean air, all the things that our water department's doing, the shade tree department, but they're really making it a municipal resolution. If we have enough resolutions around the state, then the legislature has no choice but to pass it. And I will send you a letter about all the details. But that's all, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellie. Have a good evening. Is Ellie still there? Okay. Good evening, Denise. Please unmute. Name and address for the record.
Hey everybody, it's Denise Lima, 319 East Glen Ave, Ridgewood, New Jersey. Are we thinking about a virtual sunshine binder that has more of the details of the items on the agenda? It's kind of hard to understand some of the things that are being presented and, being able to make a conscious feedback without having that. So little difficult. The second thing is on the agenda is dining corrals. And I think that word is interesting, and it does not resonate to me as something historic. So when I think about the Central Business District and I think about it being historic preservation, some of the things that we're starting to see with these corrals and or balloons or some of the other things, I know these are unprecedented times, and I don't know if we have a definition, but I think we have to keep in mind that this is a historic district. So I think there needs to be some shaping of the policies on what the corrals would be with historic preservation in mind. Second is the relocation of the bus station. I'm glad that there's a conversation about this. I actively sent some emails to the Village Council and to Jackie with my own personal experiences of the buses speeding, the buses turning widely, almost hitting my car, stacking up in the middle of Ridgewood. So I'm glad there's a consideration, but I wasn't expecting a relocation to the other side. And I don't have all the details. Again, I'm interested to hear that today. But we keep calling it a station, and they don't sell tickets inside, right? It's just a housing facility. When I think of a station, I think of the train station, and you could buy tickets and things like that. So are we really calling it a station, or should we really look at maybe changing the bus stop? And I think this, has to deal with working with the New Jersey Transit to better understand that. But I don't see buses whizzing underneath the train trestle and making that turn, and bicycles and safety. And geez, I look forward to the discussion later on today.
Thank you, Denise. Have a good evening.
All right. Next is Scarpa. Please unmute.
Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Linda Scarpa, 569 Northern Parkway. Okay, can I go?
Oh, go ahead, Linda. Sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
good.
When the budget was presented at the April 14th meeting, where it was stated an anticipated half-year salary for 2 more firefighters to be hired this year, it was clear that it didn't include benefits, pension, stipend, or payments for calls. No labor hours versus salary versus safety study was given to justify this change to the village. We still know nothing, and that's wrong. For those who do not know what I'm talking about, on February 2021, a public meeting was held where it was clearly stated by a person the plan discussed was to defund the low-paid per diem EMT and replace them with 2 more firefighters, even though it was stated at the same meeting that another one was hired in December 2020. It was further stated to use the EMT money to help fund the 2 new firefighters. The problem is the EMT is fully funded by ambulance calls at about $70,000, and the taxpayers don't cover that. But the true cost of 2 firefighters is about $180,728, not including overtime, which would happen when the 39 first responder EMTs leave, and also approximately $45 pay per call. The EMT currently makes only $10 per call and donate many volunteer hours. My numbers are based on the ordinance that I operated about the agreement with the firefighters. I don't want to get into that, though. It was further discussed to remove the EMT from all daytime calls, except for weekends where they would work day and night, but basically Monday to Friday, it would only be in the evening. The result of this is all the community involvement with the current EMT did were 4 decades, including Ridgewood ties, visits to schools, helping senior citizens refill their medications, graduation, so on and so forth, would be gone. I should tell you, one EMT person told me that when they did the 4-hour assignment at Ridgewood High School, they got paid $15, okay? In the same video, a question was asked if they would feel comfortable to take out the EMTs with an influx of new people. Would that be a better outcome? The response from this person was, we can ask other firefighters to work out a deal and make other towns to help us. That result would cost Ridgewood even more. They have to pay for borrowed services. Most importantly, it affects our safety. If we're missing 39 volunteers during a pandemic, that results in more stress to police and fire. Less labor means less time for calls, more potential deaths. And that's a fact. If you can't get there in seconds, people die. 39 loss of low-cost per diem EMT and volunteer firefighters versus hiring 2 more firefighters is a huge burden to the taxpayer, facing a 6.1 increase and a huge gamble with our village safety. I have to tell you, I've talked to
Linda, I'm sorry, your time is up, so we appreciate you calling in and comments, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, next person is Steve. Please unmute.
Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Yes, good evening, Council Knudsen and members of the Council. Stephen Aspero, 239 Greenway Road. I am honored to be able to address the Council this evening. As Pamela Perrin knows, we are co-members of the CBDAC committee, which I've enjoyed very much participating in. Pamela asked me to speak to you very, very briefly about something I've been involved in with respect to the CBDAC, and that is encouraging the council to consider actively pursuing a transit village designation for this wonderful village. It's not an uncomplicated application, but there are some amazing people who are putting their shoulders to the wheel if we're prepared to commit to filing an application with the NJDOT. As you may have seen, but if you're not, there's, in my humble opinion, some amazing, is $1 million of low-hanging fruit. $1 million of low-hanging fruit from DOT that's doled out every year. And I'm looking at what they did either last year or the year before. Long Branch got $475,000. Rutherford Station for Station Square got $210,000. Just a couple of them. Irvington got bike racks and lockers for $100,000, and a grand total of $1 million. I'm kind of a Montclair guy, as Pamela knows, and a newbie here in Ridgewood, but I must say I have been enamored by your central business district, what I call the magic rectangle, retail rectangle. Ridgewood on one side, the other side is, of course, Franklin, and the two ends up at the train station, one end and the other one in North Maple. That is a stunning, vibrant central business district. And in view of the fact that the train station, and I use that term loosely, the train station is so central in a sense at one end. In fact, when I spoke to a woman at DOT who was very involved in this transit village designation stuff, she thought that Ridgewood had been designated because she knew Ridgewood. And she said, oh my goodness, no kidding. I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think so, but I agree with you. And one more comment, and I will say thank you. If you were to look at the application materials, which you don't need to, they speak about what are you going to do if you get the designation? What do you plan to do going forward? How are you going to work on this half-mile radius around your train station, which is called the transit district? It's a mile circle with a half-mile radius around the station. And I spoke to this woman again at DOT, and I said, you know, This town has already done some remarkable things. Would we be permitted to sort of plead in our papers that the following things have happened fairly recently, which makes sense in terms of getting what they call transit-oriented TOD development? Would we perhaps, can we qualify by looking back at what's happened? And she said, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, what was I thinking about? Didn't have to tell her. The Benjamin.
Okay, Steve, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Oh, absolutely.
But we appreciate your comments and thank you for your service to our community. Thank you.
Absolutely. I hope the council will give it active consideration. Thank you kindly.
All right, anybody else, please raise your hand. I am showing no others.
Okay, why don't we go to those letters?
Okay. The first letter we have is from Dorothy Barthold. And dear Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, and Clerk, the League of Women Voters Guiding Principle is informed and active participation in government. The League has spoken publicly many times about the value of open space, the value to real estate prices, to our environment, and many other benefits. We're writing in opposition to your proposal to suspend the 0.5 $100 open space tax that has been the mechanism that allows us to apply for matching grants and is both a state and county requirement to receive both Green Acres and county grants. In November 2001, Ridgewood residents voted to approve an open space tax, approximately $40 per year for the average home, to be used to preserve open space in our village, prevent commercial development of that open space, and reinforce our village's commitment to nature and parklands within our borders. A suspension would overturn a public referendum and would put future land acquisition at risk, make us more vulnerable to commercial development, and leave our existing overutilized space underfunded. It would also make Ridgewood less grant-worthy to receive money from outside sources such as the state. Over the past 20 years, Ridgewood has received significant amounts of funding to promote its open space interests, in part due to our open space tax confirming our village's commitment to open space. Without open space, Ridgewood would be less likely to replace the Broad Street Park that was eliminated in the 1980s, resulting in the freezing of Green Acres funding to Ridgewood. With Orchard closed due to remediation and the public demanding outdoor recreation areas more than ever due to COVID, open space is more vital to our community than ever. We urge you to remove any suspension of the open tax from our 2021-22 budget. Sincerely, Dorothy Berthold, President, League of Women Voters of Ridgewood. The second is from Susan Varity, 111 Sherwood Road. The pickleball controversy should be over. The sound test was completed and it was conclusively determined that when pickleball was being played on all four courts, the noise level did not exceed the required limit. Thus, no one on the council can rationally try to limit the playing of pickleball any longer. Further, the following changes should be made as soon as possible. 1, the days and hours of pickleball play must be the same as the days and hours of playing tennis. Since most pickleball players are senior citizens, to limit pickleball play to the warmest time of day is dangerous and discriminatory against senior citizens. 2, having a paid monitor at the pickleball courts, but not the tennis courts, is unfounded and is embarrassing and humiliating to the pickleball players who feel they're being treated like little children. This is again discriminatory against senior citizens. Rather, if a monitor is required, that individual should patrol and monitor both the tennis courts and the pickleball courts. 3, since most pickleball players have friends and relatives who are not residents of Ridgewood, charging these non-residents $10 to play pickleball per day is unfair, especially when people typically play 3 or 4 times a week. This also limits the ability of Ridgewood residents to play and socialize with non-residents, relatives, and friends. Non-residents should be able to purchase a badge. The town can control how many badges to sell and at what price, or make available to non-residents discounted coupon access to the courts. The town council attempts to monitor and limit the play of pickleball is opposed by not only pickleball players, but by practically the entire town of Ridgewood. Limiting the play of pickleball has become an embarrassment to the town of Ridgewood, which is looked upon by other towns in Bergen County and the tri-state area as being anti-pickleball, and unfortunately is viewed as a town that acts as a discriminatory and unfair manner against pickleball players who are mostly senior citizens. This is from Bob Upton, 172 West Glen Avenue. Dear Mayor and council members, I see the subject West Glen Avenue safety improvements is scheduled for discussion at this meeting. I would first like to suggest that the principal safety issue affecting West Glen Avenue is the disregard shown by drivers in both directions for the speed limit, which occasionally enforcement by the police has done little to curtail. Second, the subject of constructing sidewalks between Heights Road and the North Monroe Street has been discussed, and mine is one of the properties affected. I would like to make a few observations. One, while sidewalks will improve pedestrian safety, they will do nothing to address the speeding issue. Two, the new sidewalks show heights are, in places, only about 5 feet wide between the road edge and the pre-existing property walls or boundaries. If that is sufficient for that section, it should be adequate for the proposed new section above Heights. Three, a number of affected properties have spaces in front that are frequently used by post office and package delivery vehicles, construction vehicles, landscapers, and emergency vehicles, as well as private vehicles. What provision will be made to address increased safety concerns created by these vehicles blocking traffic or reversing into driveways? Lastly, I trust that all residents, especially those directly affected, will have the opportunity to review and comment on any plans for West Glen Avenue. Thank you. And the last is from Linda McNamara, 575 Knickerbocker Road. Dear Mayor, council members, village manager, village attorney, as you continue with the arduous budget process, I'm hoping that you will not suspend the open space tax as a measure to better balance the budget. I'm also concerned that there seems to be a lack of information from monies borrowed from the trust fund and whether they have been returned. In addition, many residents are concerned about the changes being made to our EMT program. I have heard that the problems alluded to have been rectified, and any further cuts, changes will affect the EMT program adversely. I don't like higher tax increases any more than the next person does, but we're in the middle of unprecedented times, which created a big loss of parking revenues. In addition, we now pay to have our recycling dumped somewhere else since the market has collapsed for recyclables, thereby creating a loss of revenue for the village. I would rather see at this time an increase over the cap than to try to balance the budget on altering the above referenced programs. Sincerely, Linda McNamara. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Donna. Just real quick, would you be good enough to forward Bob Upton's email to me? I don't know if anyone else is interested in seeing it. I want to wrap my head around the detail. Yeah, I think everyone would like to see that because it has some level of specificity regarding that. And the other two things, I don't think the village council has taken any formal action on the open space tax. So we haven't done anything with it. It was just kind of a conversation to lessen the potential impact of a tax increase. And it was based on, just some ideas being thrown out there. And just one last question for our village manager. Isn't the monitor, that monitor at the courts going to all different courts? It's not specific.
That was my understanding, yes.
They're checking badges everywhere.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. All right. Good. With that, we'll close public comments and we'll go to the manager's report.
Okay. I do want to mention that we are having a COVID vaccine clinic tomorrow. We still have about approximately 20 doses of Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccines. If you are interested, please go to the village website at the bottom where it says COVID vaccine registration. Click on the registration link and you can register for tomorrow's clinic. I want to say there are some parking changes that are going into effect on May 1st. All residential parking regulations will be enforced, and this includes overnight parking from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. on the streets. There will be 24-hour parking spaces available in the train station lot and the Cottage Place lot. It's $200 for 3 months. And so if you're interested in having one of those spaces, please contact our Village Hall reception desk. Also, overnight parking in the Central Business District is open to all village residents. You can purchase overnight parking permits. It's $75 for 3 months or $150 for 6 months. And also, if you have friends or relatives who live outside of Ridgewood, we are offering our Ridgewood parking permits for commuters available to non-residents for the remainder of this year only. And it's at the price charged to our residents, and it's prorated as to when you purchase it during the year. and that will be again for this year only. We are holding a drive-through dog rabies clinic on May 5th at 6 p.m. in the Graden Pool parking lot. Dogs must be on a leash of 5 feet or less. Social distancing protocols will be enforced, and dogs will exit the car to get the vaccine. New dogs need to bring proof of prior vaccination to be eligible for a 3-year certificate. If you have any questions, you can call the health department at 201-670-5500, extension 503. The Village of Ridgewood Health Department has hired a vulnerable population outreach coordinator through grant funding. This person is working to ensure at-risk residents in the Village of Ridgewood have access to support services such as housing, access to meal providers if the at-risk resident is unable to care for himself or herself, and insurance coverage. You may have a neighbor or a relative who is a Ridgewood resident and is elderly, or perhaps economically challenged, or suffers from mental illness and may need assistance. Our vulnerable population outreach coordinator's name is Mariani Furman Cornelio. If you or someone you know needs assistance, you may call her at 201-670-5500, extension 244. I just want to remind everyone that Graden Pool membership is now open on Community Pass, and if you purchase your memberships through April 30th, you will receive a 10% price discount. The pool season runs from June 5th through September 6th, which is Labor Day. And if you have any questions, please call the Recreation Department at 201-670-5560. Graden Pool informational breakfast for older adults will be held on June 5th from 10:30 a.m. to noon. Graden Pool will welcome the older adults to celebrate summer 2021. Enjoy a wrapped breakfast to live music and learn all that Graden Pool and Park have to offer. Registration is required. You have to email Deanna Shablik at dshablik@ridgewoodnj.net or call 201-670-5500, extension 301. There are a few age-friendly Ridgewood events. They are being held in conjunction with the Ridgewood Public Library. You can go to the Ridgewood Public Library's website to sign up. They're all being held via Zoom. One is for property tax relief on May 12th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Elder Law on May 19th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And then Medicare 101 for the baby boomers on June 1st from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Our upcoming Village Council meetings are broadcast live. They are shown on YouTube as well as streamed on our website. May 5th is a public work session at 7:30 p.m. May 12th is our regular council public meeting. We are going to consider the amendments for the budget at that time, and that's at 8:00 p.m. And then May 26th is a village council public work session at 7:30 p.m. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Heather. Councilwoman Perrin.
Thank you, Mayor. The Open Space Committee met on April 15th, and we noted that the Open Space and Recreation Plan is now out of date, and it is our obligation at the committee to update it because that is part of the master plan. And also, if it's out of date, it affects our eligibility for certain grants. So we plan for our May 20th meeting to have the Vice President of the New Jersey Land Conservancy come to speak with us about the requirements for an open space and recreation plan. And also, we are going to start park walks. We have about 13 open spaces in Ridgewood. And actually, as long as I've lived in Ridgewood, some of them I didn't know existed. And so to reach out to residents and help them find all these open spaces, we're going to be scheduling walks through them throughout the spring, summer, and fall. So the first one is May 8th at Citizens Park at 10 o'clock, and we'll meet at the Rock. And CBDAC, the Central Business District Advisory Committee, hasn't met since our last meeting, but tonight certain members of the committee have brought together a meeting for the property owners in town. And I hope that they have a robust discussion. I'm sure there are many topics that they can cover. And let's see, Chamber of Commerce. Well, you probably know that Feed the Front Lines is the Chamber's initiative. And they have now picked up from 23 Ridgewood restaurants, 58,569 meals, and delivered them to food pantries throughout the county. And several of those are, well, several of the recipients were in Ridgewood, about 1,000 meals a week here in Ridgewood. So that's been wonderful. And I want to thank the 350 volunteers who have been drivers and helping in every way. Green Ridgewood, we had the styrofoam drive, and I got some good pictures of Councilman Seaton shoveling styrofoam. We collected 2 dumpsters plus 2 truck worths of styrofoam, and approximately 250 cars came through. And so all of that styrofoam was taken to a densifier plant for recycling. And although styrofoam is very light and doesn't weigh much in our garbage, it takes up a lot of space in landfill. So this was really a very important project. And I thank all the volunteers who pulled it together. And I think it was a great success. Also, tomorrow night, Green Ridgewood and the library are sponsoring a town hall, a forum on renewable government energy aggregation. And that's at 7 o'clock via Zoom. You can sign up on the library's website for the sustainability series. And this is for the purpose of reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. And if anyone feels that they were misled by our flyers, which mentioned the potential of lowering electricity bills, I sincerely apologize. The reason we are exploring this is because the master plan for the master energy plan for New Jersey has the goal of using 100% clean energy by 2050. And much of the initiatives are passed down to the local governments. So we have an obligation to explore how we can reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And therefore, if we can get electricity from a renewable source, that's great. And also we need to accelerate development of renewable energy industry. So I hope you all, anyone who's interested, can join us. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. The Citizen Safety Advisory Committee met on April 15th. We discussed the idea of having the village being designated as a transit village. And as you heard, the council will be discussing that tonight. We also discussed the concept plan of installing sidewalks on West Glen Avenue, and that's being discussed tonight as well. An update on Street Smart New Jersey. There's a subcommittee of Citizen Safety Advisory Committee. They're working with Street Smart New Jersey. And the subcommittee is looking into posters that Street Smart has. These posters are really like educational posters, and they are, hopefully going to help make people aware of best practices to drive smart and walk smart in our village. A discussion took place regarding the end of the temporary suspension of parking regulations as of May 1st. As you heard Heather Maylander say, please let your friends and neighbors know. And for anybody needing overnight parking on a regular basis, there'll be a number of designated parking spaces in the Cottage Street lot, as well as the train station, available for a 3-month period, 24 hours a day for $200. The next CSAC meeting is May 20th. And the planning board met on April 20th. We did a Historic Preservation Commission review of the sign for the Coldwell Banker Realty at 44 Franklin Avenue, which was approved. We memorialized the resolution of approval for minor site plan approval and variance relief at 54 East Ridgewood Avenue. We also memorialized the resolution of approval for preliminary and final major site plan approval for 555 and 565 North Maple Avenue. The planning board members received a tremendous amount of information from New Jersey Future Aging Friendly prior to our meeting. The board members had a discussion regarding the council's resolution to adopt the New Jersey Future Aging Friendly Land Use Implementation Plan. And it was requested by the board members that they needed more time to do some research and decide if there was going to be any kind of conflict with the village's master plan process. Our next planning board meeting is Tuesday, May 4th at 7:30. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. So I had the privilege and honor to be on the American Legion Post 53 Scholarship Interview Committee for Girls and Boys State. We interviewed juniors. All 4 of them were from Ridgewood High School. And I want to congratulate the following: Matt Roush, Palmer Yates, Philip Williams for Boys State, and Grace DeAngelis for Girls State. So they will be representing Ridgewood at Boys State and Girls State for 2021. And I can tell you, after sitting in the interviews with these fine young adults from Ridgewood, we are going to be represented very well. And we'll all be very proud of how they do once they get there. Actually, Grace is the only one. The Girls State is going to be virtual this year. So the boys will be going, but Grace will be doing virtual. So I just wanted to congratulate all of them on their successes thus far. In their interviews, I don't know how many, I don't know where they find the time to do all of the things that they do, including their schoolwork and everything else that they do to volunteer. So it was really a lot of fun. Parks and Rec, we had our meeting this week on Tuesday. Just to tag on to community service that Pam was talking about. We have a lot of community service going on within the village. I think they talked about the Dowling family, the cleanup of the Goffel Brook. There was another group doing community service. They got 7 truckloads of garbage cleaned from our parks. The Dartmouth College alumni from Ridgewood are going to be cleaning up Habernickel and the gardens up there. So individuals within Ridgewood are forming their own groups to kind of stay connected and also do good for the village. As Heather mentioned, Graydon Pool is going to be open, and also our summer camp will be open. So as opposed to last year where COVID kind of put the damper on the fun in Ridgewood, we're going to actually have a lot of stuff going on this summer. So that was good. Let's see. Hold on, I'm just going through some of this other stuff. So the community center actually has been working with Parks and Rec, doing virtual classes since the end of 2020. And they've done for seniors how-to online, so Tai Chi, Silver Strength, yoga, and also men's fitness. So they want to try and continue, even though we're starting to kind of come out of this COVID the COVID challenges. They want to let everybody know that you can still do stuff online as they start to add other things. They did talk about Health Barn and the fact that any of the joint programs that we do with them, they need to, obviously we're going to be going through an RFP at the Gatehouse. So they're hoping to start planning, but know that there might be some delays due to the fact that we are going out to bid, and they don't want to put the programs on the calendar for the next year, not knowing who's going to be the successful bidder. They also received the Roy Grant for learning, exploring, and adaptive programs for individuals with special needs. Let's see what else. And then Fields Committee, as it relates to Parks and Rec. Coach Johnson had met Fields Committee and was talking about the fee schedule that is set up for the fields. And there's a subcommittee that's going to come to the village council to discuss maybe talking about the fees and what we can do to maybe make things a little bit less challenging for them as they get up and running again. The fees for the fields are $600 a day, and with the social distancing that we're still going to be required to do, they may make some sort of a proposal to us to maybe be a little lenient on the fees. So I have to wait to see how that's going to come to us, but that should be to us pretty soon. Maple Park lights are up and working. And there's a lot of people really happy that we have that extra time and space over there to enjoy. So I think that's about it for Parks and Rec. Thank you.
And that's it for your report, right? That was a link.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Councilwoman Walsh. Is Mike frozen?
Yeah, a little bit. Thank you, Mayor. It sounds like everybody's been pretty busy. The Community Center Advisory Board met, and between the village manager and Councilwoman Walsh, they pretty much announced everything I was going to announce. So thank you very much. The Styrofoam Drive, again, was a great event. I was there with my son, Hunter, who worked even harder than I did. So he was an asset, and, it was a great drive. We collected a ton of Styrofoam, more than I've ever seen. So it was great to get that out of the waste stream. The Ridgewood Arts Council, they are going to meet tomorrow, but on April 19th, they held their first artist talk of the year with Ridgewood's own Tony Award winner, Ali Stroker. She discussed, her journey and the book that she has co-authored, and it was a very lively discussion. It was really great, well attended. And we plan on having a lot more in the future with various artists, so stay tuned for that. And then the Youth Environmental Council had an event on Saturday. It was sort of like a mini Earth Day fair. So it's a group of students, Ridgewood students, ranging from 5th grade to seniors in high school. And they totally put the event together themselves. They had 4 stations. One was a composting station, so they discussed composting and how you do it, and they had some examples in the gardens that Health Barn uses. There was a swap party station, so these students had QRLs that you could scan with your phone, and all the stuff pops up that shows you how to swap out single-use items that you have around your home for reusable items. Sorry about the Dartmouth group, because there was a nature walk at Habernickel, and there was a nature walk / garbage pickup. So we moved some garbage cans around, and they went down the trail and by the river, and people had, looked at the trees, and they were discussing some of the wildlife in the area, and they picked up little bags of garbage as they went around. So the Dartmouth group might have a pretty easy go of it at Habernickel. And there was a seed planting station, so they learned how to plant seeds. And it was pretty well attended. It wasn't mobbed, so it was nice. It was relaxing. I think it was great for the kids. I'd really like to thank Stacy Antine of Health Barn for helping out, and George Wolfson. Together, we just kind of got the kids together and let them run with this. So it was really their event. And I'd like to thank Health Barn's intern, Victoria, who was able to handle a lot of the meetings and sending out notices and keeping everybody corralled. So she did a really great job, and it was an amazing group effort. And we'll be having a follow-up meeting on Friday to discuss with the group of students what their next move is. And stay tuned, because these are some pretty impressive kids, and I'd like to see what ideas they come up with next to keep Ridgewood a little bit more sustainable. So I think that's everything I have, and I should do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So now it's my turn. Access met a week and a half ago. We went over the special needs housing, which is at the corner of Ridgewood Ave and Maple at the old Seal Funds building. Everyone is anxiously waiting for the applications to become available. And as luck would have it, Bergen County United Way did in fact post the applications for the independent special needs housing units. So that's for adult special needs. So it's really exciting. That application is available through Bergen County United Way. Just look under Ridgewood. Anyone who's interested, that's independent housing special needs. So we're really excited about that. Also, we discussed the Reut grant and all the opportunities for the different programming that has been scheduled through the Reut grant. I think we'll get that flyer and probably post it up on the village website and share it on social media, so everyone in the special needs community is aware of the type of programming that we've organized for this year. So it's really exciting. It's a lot of different programming. So it's a great opportunity for members of our special needs community. July 4th committee did meet Monday evening. This year we are planning a parade. The theme will be Stronger Together, and the parade is planned for Monday, July 5th, because July 4th falls on a Sunday. The parade is always on the following Monday. The flag raising will be similar to 2020, and the parade will continue on with messaging to stay safe, follow social distancing guidelines, and we're going to be looking to have paper masks to hand out. But of course, everything is, I guess, hinging on what the guidelines are at that time and the number of individuals that are vaccinated and what things look like at that time. The parade will take the usual full route, and I should point out that we really do appreciate the feedback from our residents who were listening to my report the last go around, discussing the possibility of a shorter parade route. A lot of this was taken into consideration, and we're going to take the regular full parade route. As always, fundraising for the July 4th committee is a challenge, especially since so many people think that the parade and fireworks are funded through the village, through the government. And it's not. This is all a community effort. The July 4th committee is a 501c3 that operates to run these both programs, and no fireworks this year, but they are working on a parade. So it's really exciting. Friends of the Library, actually the Library Board of Trustees met last night. Friends of the Library are seeking volunteers looking to fill positions of secretary, assistant treasurer, and next year's luncheon volunteers. Friends really needs volunteers. So if anyone's interested, please email friends@ridgewoodlibrary.org, or you can email me directly and I'll be happy to forward that on. Last week, the board was actually able to apply for a CARES Act mini grant. We organized a very quick meeting thanks to Heather. We were able to make certain we did everything properly and got our application in. We're also applying for grants through the National Endowment for Arts and Humanities, also through the CARES Act. So that's really exciting. The Library Reimagine grant is due June 4th, and we would like to have that filed by May 28th. So we are going to be, hopefully everyone will be supporting the resolution. I believe it's on our schedule for May 12th, and we would have that delivered to them by May 13th for their grant. And let me just say, and one last thing. We're really, really, really excited that today we were able to submit our application for the Historic Zabriskie Shedler House to the New Jersey Historic Trust Fund. I want to thank our village manager for her work, Beth Spinato for her work, Jana Fricke, who has been amazing organizing all of this. Beth, I hope I'm going to say her name right, Borkland from Connolly Hickey, who organized our entire application. And especially I want to thank all members of this village council, every single one. Everybody submitted a letter in support, and to all the members of our community who rallied and sent in letters. It's just an amazing amount of letters that we received in support of this application and grant opportunity. This is a 50-50 match on funds already spent, and it is an absolute win-win for the village of Ridgewood, and hopefully we'll get that. I know we were one of the top contenders last go around. Hopefully the Statue of Liberty isn't looking for money this year. And I think that's all I have. And with that, we will go back to our meeting, and I think we have a presentation, Peter Lupo, 5G. So is Peter in the, okay.
So I was fortunate to see this presentation by Peter Lupo. 5G is coming to all of New Jersey, and I'll leave it to him and his presentation so that you get the full information. But this is something that will happen soon, probably within the next 3 months or less, so, or begin in that time frame. So Mr. Lupo, if you would come into the meeting and introduce yourself, and you can start your presentation.
Of course. Thank you for the introduction. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Can you also see the presentation?
Yes.
I think everybody can see it. Good evening, Peter. How are you?
Good evening. So, yep, Peter Lupo. I am a sole member of Hoplite Communications. I'm an attorney, and I'll give a little more of my credentials shortly, but I guess I'll go right into the presentation if everyone's ready.
Go ahead.
So just to give you a little bit of an overview, I'm going to talk a little bit about 5G telecommunications and how it's going to impact your municipality. So one of the key things to take away from this is LTE. That's where the current networks we use right now. You may have some phones that say 5G, but none of them, I could trust me, are on 5G. It's more of a marketing thing. They may have enhanced LTE, but there's nowhere in Jersey that actually has 5G. So right now, LTE is a much longer wave. What 5G is going to bring is a small nano wave technology. And what that's going to allow for is great network capacity. That means people are going to be able to operate on the network and without disruption. So think about yourself where you're at a sporting event at a high school and you want to send a photo to a family member and you get the little red exclamation mark because it didn't because the picture didn't go through or the video didn't go through. That's because of a lack of capacity. So if too many people using the network, you won't allow you to go ahead and send anything. What this is going to allow is much, much greater capacity. You have a lot more sensors able to connect, and you have fewer drop calls. So some of the things it's going to allow for is traffic improvement, public safety, and energy savings. And I'll show you over here. For example, you'll have sensors connected to your to your poles. So if people or pedestrians and cars go by in the streets, the lamps will go on. When it's not in use, it'll go off. It'll be an enormous savings. So it'll be very smart technology. So it won't be on all night and shining on pedestrians and cars aren't going by. So 4 principal ways 5G is going to impact you: physical deployment, RF emission levels, the legal framework, and monetization opportunities. And I'll talk about each one in different categories. The first, I think, thing to take away before what I mentioned before about nanotechnology, that's 5G and LTE, is that things are going to be, they're going to do what's called network densification. So right now, 4G is put on towers, they're on rooftops, they're spaced very far apart, and they're in the background, they're in the periphery of our lives. What's going to happen now is network densification. And that's going to be caused because the nano wave technology only has a limited propagation. So it only goes a certain amount of distance, roughly a football and a half field apart, versus today's towers which go 3, 4, 5 miles, maybe further. So you're going to see telephone poles in your private right of way, your public right of way, I should say, where they're going to put these mini towers on. So to give you what network densification looks like, 4G is on the left. This is not any municipality in New Jersey, but it's a good way of depicting what network densification will look like. So imagine 4G on the left-hand side. Those red dots are conventional 150-foot, 200-foot high towers. Those red lines connecting them are fiber. That creates the network that we use for wireless for 4G. On the right-hand side, you still see the red dots and the red lines. Those little blue dots and those blue lines connecting those little blue dots is what network densification looks like. This is going to be this big explosion of these utility poles in a public right of way, with these cell phone antennas on top of it. So what you'll see here, I have an office near Rutgers. This is at Rutgers University. It's a good Mexican restaurant over here. But when I drove by, the street was closed because there was this bucket truck and this guy working on the utility line. And right ahead of this truck is a police officer with the lane shut down. So not only will they be installing their small cells on these utility poles, but they'll also be maintaining it. It requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of tweaking. The antennas are going to break down. They need to be upgraded. So they're going to be, instead of being on a periphery, as they are with existing 4G 150-foot high monopole, they're going to be operating the public rights of way on the streets. So you're going to have lane closures, street closures. They'll be operating on the road. They'll basically be more conspicuous than they were before. And to show you what a small cell site looks like, this, just by the way, is a 4G small cell site, but for illustrative purposes of what they look like, this is what it's going to look like, more or less. It'll be a roughly 38-foot, maybe 42 high foot conventional wooden utility pole. They'll have antennas on top of it. They'll have jumper cables running down to their radio units. That's what powers up the transmission and receipt of the signal from your phone. And then there'll be a little electrical meter on the bottom that'll measure the consumption. And then the electrical company will bill the utility, the carrier, such as Verizon or AT&T. So this gives you a good example of what it looks like. To give you a understanding what could also potentially happen, although I don't think it will happen very much, they could put it on top of a 1.5-story building like this in North Brunswick. This is Jennifer Convertibles, and they have little antennas on top of there. I don't foresee really much of this going on, but it could happen. And I thought this would be good to give you for illustrative purposes. RF emission levels, there'll be a lot more antennas. You have antennas closer to the public. And one thing you're going to see, for example, is that businesses would be, right in front of a utility pole. People's, Central Hall Colonials, someone could look out the bedroom window, and whatever distance it is to the street, they'll be able to look at a utility pole with antennas on top of it. And people will invariably be concerned about RF emission levels and all the other concerns people will have about RF emission levels, and about basically looking at almost eye level when they're on the second floor of the home at these towers. So to give you kind of a little view of what 5G is going to look like, so this is what's called a heat map. I did this for Ridgewood. It shows you in the oranges and dark reds, that's going to be the highest energy levels. And then as you get out to areas where less sparsely populated, parks, maybe where houses a little further spread apart, would be the light yellows. And this shows you the radiation intensity that'll be coming out, the radio waves that come out of the antennas. And you see over here that the reddest areas are going to be near a county road. So 17 right over here, where the road goes through there, you see the reds. Town center would be the dark reds. And then, of course, light yellows as you get near Hocus and Midland Park, it starts turning to light yellow as mostly residential homes. So this gives you an idea of what a heat map looks like. The legal framework, right now, there's evolving legal framework. You have the Telecommunications Act of '93, Clinton-era legislation, 2013. You have the Middle Class Tax Relief Act under the Obama administration. That's 2013. 2018 is the FCC car ruling, which most specifically deals with small cells and right of way under the Trump administration. And in 2020, you have another challenge in the Ninth Circuit that further modifies things. And what's happening is the state law pending, and there's just a very, very fluid situation as municipalities challenge the car ruling in 2018. So anyway, that's kind of the legal backdrop for things. Some of the key takeaways to take away from the car ruling is that they've made it very, very restrictive. You have to allow these small cell sites into town. The FCC mandates that you can't either expressly prohibit it or materially inhibit it. So that's, I'll give you that kind of upfront. The two other takeaways is that there's a 90-day shot clock if they put up a new utility pole, in which for the municipality to take in the application, say in this case would be a building permit, would probably trigger it, or 60 days for an existing utility pole. So those are two big takeaways in terms of the time constraints we have from the time the carrier expresses interest and actually formally submit an application to the time it's actually given. In that backdrop, there's monetization opportunities. So they're going to spend, the carrier will be spending about $275 billion to deploy 5G across the country, and they'll expect to make $700 to $1 trillion over the next 10 years off it. So it'll be very nice for them, which is great. We're all capitalists here. But you, as a municipality, provide vital services for these carriers. You plow the roads. You have police. You got to make sure that potholes are filled for those bucket trucks when they come around to do the maintenance and installation. They'll have cleared roads and make sure there's not puddles because you have storm surge systems and all that you provide for the members of the public, but they also get a benefit from that, and you're entitled to collect monies on that. And as your representative, if you decide to use me, I'll make sure you get the maximum amount allowed under law. So just a little bit about me. I'm licensed in New York and New Jersey. I've been practicing since 2000. I've been in the wireless industry for a little over 15 years now. And I was on the carrier side until the last 2 years. I was on the carrier side negotiating leases, doing their regulatory compliance about zoning and all these other things. And so I appeared as special witness for the carriers. In the last 2 years, I broke off with them, and I now work exclusively for municipalities. And I bring all those years of work on the carrier side, knowing the personalities, knowing how everything operates from the inside out to the municipalities. So to monetize, as I mentioned before, make sure you get the highest amount of money, and knowing these characters and people, decision makers to the carrier side, and knowing the law, I can maximize the amount of money you get. Make sure you have right-of-way agreements, franchise agreements, and pole attachment agreements if you own the utility structure. Another big thing to take away from here is that you keep all of the monetization. So everything that you get goes to you. The way I make money, it'll be no cost to the municipality. I make my money purely by money coming in by the applicant. So if Verizon comes in and they want, for example, put up 50 utility poles in town, they would put in an escrow for me, and I would bill against the escrow paid by the applicant. In this case, this example would be Verizon. And that's how I make my money. And I do a number of services for the municipality at no cost, effectively offset by the carrier's application fees. And that's all permitted under the municipal land use law, routinely done. Escrow accounts set up by engineers, town engineers, where you don't have an expertise, or a lawyer where you don't have an expertise, and they're permitted to bill against it. What I'll do for you, if you decide, moves from here into, if you want to adopt me, I'll do a 5G ordinance for you. Right now, you don't have one. I'll also do an update on your 4G ordinance. I'll make sure I monitor updates and report to your business administrator and of course, elected officials about changes to the law, and suggest changes to the ordinance I draft as it becomes necessary by way of law, by state or federal law, and make sure you comply with federal and state laws. I'll make sure I provide RF safety reports for each upgrade, and make sure it complies with FCC emission levels. And to show you one of the things I'll do for your town, if you decide to adopt me, and again, at no cost, is maintain an ArcGIS site. So what I'll do is I'll plot out every single location that the carrier places one of these small cell sites on. And I will make sure I include the FCC health and safety reports, about a 35-page report. I'll make sure I include information like latitude, longitudes, cross streets, so residents can search when they are concerned about something. They call the construction official, or of course the mayor, or any of the other elected officials, or the business administrator. You can point them to a website, which ideally I integrate with your town website, and they can pull this information. You can double click on one of these little towers. They'll get a photo of the site, the actual real life photo of the site. They get information about the name of the carrier, date installation, the type of installation, of course, the health and safety report, which is going to be very important. And it also serves for the town to maintain. There'll be lots of these towers going in. There'll be knowledge management. They'll know what's in town, and I'll maintain that for you. I'll make sure that, as I mentioned, do the annual reports, GIS system, ensure neat and orderly workmanship, and be the single point of contact for you and liaison between the carrier and the municipality. So some of the key things, as I mentioned before, single point of contact, I'll be continuous oversight, and make sure that, things are done in the up and up, and the shortcuts aren't taken on the carrier side. So the kind of a recap, I'll draft your 5G ordinance and also update your 4G ordinance. Make sure right-of-way use agreement is signed between the carrier and the municipality that most maximizes your interests. Some of the key things also, I'll make sure of in the ordinance is that it matches streetscapes. So the utility poles and the antennas match a streetscape as much as possible. Make sure there's continuous oversight and do a post-installation inspection. Make sure everything is up to snuff and matches the CDs as submitted to the municipality. And as I mentioned before, I have an inside out look at what happens with the municipalities. They're under a lot of pressure. They have competition with rivals. They have FCC mandated deadlines. They buy the spectrum. They just can't sit on it. They have to deploy it. And if you've been watching the TV commercials, Verizon's been, bragging about their 5G network, which they haven't built yet. So they're going to have to start putting their network where the mouth is, so to speak. So they have, they have to go ahead and start deploying it and have deployment goals and lots of money for the upper management to make and meet these goals. So what you have is careless rush work. They try not to pull permits. They always like to do that. And the work doesn't match your plans. Those last minute changes are done and really doesn't really benefit the town. Kind of conclusion, part of the reason I told you before I broke off with the carrier side is I'm in the Army Reserve. I'm a public affairs officer, and I was mobilized in 2018. I was in northern Afghanistan and got to work with the four-star general who ran the Afghanistan mission. Actually, if you read the New York Times, my boss, General Miller, is in there quite a bit. In the New York Times, he was just there just the other day. So I did the public affairs for him. I did interviews for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Anyway, so I broke off my connection with the carrier side, came back and started my own practice, dedicated myself to the carrier side. And that concludes my my presentation. So I'm here to answer any kind of questions. I'm sure there's lots of questions about it, and I'm happy to share anything that anyone may have about 5G and how we can help maintain order in town and health and safety and aesthetics.
Okay. So thank you, Peter. Maybe we can get rid of the shared screen if everyone's okay with that, and then we can kind of see everyone again. Let's just see. Okay, so once again, thank you for your service to our nation. And we'll let everyone kind of jump in and ask questions because I'm sure there's an awful lot.
My question. Thank you, Peter, for your presentation. So I'm just curious, how many new polls should we expect?
So that's a very good question. And the way I look at it right now is as far as I can see what's happening in Eastern Bergen County. So I represent Bergen County as a whole, all the county roads. And I also represent a lot of the Eastern Bergen County municipalities like Fort Lee, Cliffside Park, Edgewater, and Fairview. And what we're seeing now is that Verizon's coming in with the strongest foot forward. So they're building full sites. And making wall-to-wall commitments to the area. AT&T is doing a much more limited application rollout. I don't know what their exactly plans. It might be a monetary constraint, but I think the simple answer to your question is going to do it gradually. I don't think they're going to come in overnight and build a full network. And some of the other variables I don't know about to give you a good answer right now is that there's Dish Network, which inherited a bunch of spectrum from Sprint and T-Mobile as part of the divestiture agreement with the FCC and FTC to allow a true fourth competitor. And Dish is gearing up to start building. And I don't know what the build plan is just yet. And there's two smaller other carriers. There's Consumer's Choice, there's Cricket, and there's Boost Mobile. So I don't know what their appetite is right now, but I would say you're going to have in the area of hundreds of new utility poles, over the next 2 to 4 years that'll be going up.
Will they use existing utility poles as well as new ones? Yeah.
So they will. And what I'm going to do in the ordinance. So for example, right now in Cliffside Park, I'm finding they're trying to put up utility poles within 30 feet of each other. So there was a resident in Cliffside Park who, and actually he doesn't know the worst of it. He's upset because they're putting one utility pole up, which he got whiff of. And what I just found out is that next to Verizon's pole, which he complained about, AT&T is putting up one like less than 30 feet away from there. So it's going to be 2 on his corner. And he's very upset, understandably. But part of what I do is I keep track of that. And in the ordinance, I restrict for one thing, they have a responsibility and obligation to utilize existing infrastructure. So if PSE&G or Verizon Telephone already has a utility pole, they have to first try to attempt to use existing infrastructure to prevent proliferation. of utility poles is number one. And then number two, they have to stay within at least 150 feet apart of each other, unless they show that there's a technical reason why they can't comply with that. And if they do, then under the FCC, we have to allow them to build a utility pole. But my ordinance, the way I draft it, make sure that they don't go ahead and start putting up utility poles everywhere. They have to use it sparingly. And as I mentioned, have to use existing infrastructure, as you kind of alluded to, and secondarily keep it at least spaced 150 feet apart from each other, unless they can show a reason why they can't comply.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions?
Yes. Have any health studies been done to see what the effect of these RF emissions or the electromagnetic field is on humans or animals or even plant life?
So, that's always a very popular question. And one of the things is the FCC is the one who has authority about the health and safety. It's called continuous human exposure. A continuous human exposure. So the FCC has complete authority about the safety of it. So, and I know I've seen studies from Italy and other institutes saying 5G causes heart murmurs and cancer. So there are definitely studies out there that you're probably going to hear from your constituents who are going to point to potential adverse side effects from the electromagnetic emissions, as you mentioned before, from the radio waves. But the FCC is saying that it is in fact safe to operate, and that is non-appealable. You can't say, well, we're not going to allow it in town because the Guzzi Institute in Italy shows it causes heart murmurs. So as far as we're concerned, it is safe. It does meet compliant with the FCC, and it's presumed to be safe for human exposure.
Bernadette, do you have any questions? She's muted.
I have one. Do you know anything about Ridgewood?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, good luck with this, because the guy in Cliffside Park is probably going to be repeated several hundred times over. So if you're talking about hundreds of new poles, I mean, residents really turn out to fight the big 150 current poles that come out. And I remember a discussion about some nodes. There were nodes they were putting on to kind of enhance the existing pole network around, I believe, Willard School at one point. And people were coming out about those, and they're very similar to what you're talking about. It's just a little box on a pole that you more than likely wouldn't see. But I mean, people are going to come out in force in every neighborhood and every household. So, I mean, how would you plan on dealing with, like 500 Cliffside Park guys here in Ridgewood and like pretty much every neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, I guess I would be the guy who's going to take the bullet. I mean, I'll go up there. What I suggest is when we get the construction drawings, we start the deployment, we notice the residents. Well, my idea and the way I think we should do it, and I've been doing it in other municipalities, is to make it a permitted use. There's no point in subjecting it to a zoning hearing when there's no authority to disapprove it. Just no way of disproving it in terms of it being a permitted, as a discretionary application. So my thoughts are to make it because of the 60 and 90-day shot clocks, make it a permitted use. But I would suggest noticing the residents who are directly impacted by it, so they don't feel that they're being, and it'll be something that'll be discussed at the right-of-way use agreement. That's something that Carrier's going to propose to us, and to allow to use certain locations in the municipality. My suggestion is to go ahead and have a public hearing about it, allow people who are going to be impacted specifically and advertise in the paper to come in and make their concerns known. I'll be there, of course, for the public hearing to discuss this and explain, FCC position, the fact that their authority on this is final, supreme on it. There's no way of not allowing it in there. The key thing about the ordinance is to scratch back as much as we can to maintain control of the rollout, have aesthetic requirements, streetscape, requirements. I think I heard someone mention before about Caldwell Banker having a sign. I know a lot of municipalities, Chester, New Jersey does that, Morristown, Madison, New Jersey, cares about its downtown districts, don't want over commercialization. They want to keep things a certain type of tenor, if you would, in the town, and help find ways of reducing the aesthetic impact. So there are little ways, if you have a well-crafted ordinance, that could control the aesthetic impact of it. I think the ArcGIS website I suggested before, having health and safety reports available for the public, where they can put in cross streets or latitudes, longitudes or the address to go in on that health and safety report will help, I hope, allay some of the concerns of the residents. Some people, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, are going to be content, and that's a reality. And there's no way of making those people happy. That's the bad news I have to deliver. Again, it is a mandate. The carrier can sue you and win handling in court if you deny any applications, unless we impose reasonable restrictions, which is something I've already negotiated with the carrier. They originally agreed to some provisions of my ordinance, but I think the ordinance I have, and I'm introducing in Bergen County as a county, and then the municipalities represent, are the best we can do really to control things and allay some of the concerns of the residents.
All right, thank you, Pete.
Of course.
Mayor, I have a couple of questions.
Oh, sure, go ahead, Matt.
Yep. Peter, how many or which towns in Bergen County have taken you on and, as you proposed to the council tonight?
I would say besides the county, 10. If I'm going off the top of my head, Lodi, Garfield, Fairview, Fort Lee, Edgewater, Cliffside Park, Palisades Park. I can't really, I don't have the list in front of me, but I would say 10 to 12. I know Saddle River, according to the business administrator, is moving forward with adopting me. I think Frank Lakes is going to adopt me. I can't actually commit to that, but I was told moving forward. So I'm going to guess, by the end of the month, maybe up to 15 municipalities in Bergen County.
Okay, thanks for that. And I remember reading in terms of the materials that there is some funding. How does the funding mechanism work in terms of getting fees from the providers on this?
So when we grant authorization for them to be in our public right away, it's your right of way. You have to give it to them, but they do first have to ask for permission. That'll be in a right of way use agreement, and it'll also be spelled on the ordinance, the dollar amount they have to pay per annum per pole to the municipality directly. So that'll be part of the ordinance that'll be reiterated in the right of way use agreement.
So that's per pole, and that's the way that the funding is driven?
Correct. It's roughly $270 per pole per annum paid directly to the municipality.
Have you seen any studies from any of the providers that have outlined or at least identified Ridgewood as a municipality for their development or their installation, and come to an idea of how many poles we might be looking at in Ridgewood? Or is that something that hasn't been determined yet?
So I have not seen a report specific on it. I could tell you that having been 15 years, how the carriers work. They, especially AT&T and Verizon, who happen to have the more affluent customers, they're going to go for the most densely populated, affluent areas first. So they're going to go from Manhattan, they'll go from Eastern Bergen County. They're going to hit Cliffside Parks, which have I think right now between just AT&T and Verizon. AT&T is only doing a very small build, nearly 100 sites alone in Cliffside Park. So they're going to work its way from there and go west. And I imagine Mahwah will probably be one of the last ones, Ramsey and Mahwah being the most spread out. Nice, beautiful areas themselves, but very spread out. So it won't have the equation of having the most amount of people per node. So Cliffside Park, you're going to have one node, and you're going to have 20 houses, 40 houses served by it. In Mahwah, you're going to have maybe 2 houses served by a node. So the numbers don't add up as good as it does in Eastern Bergen County. But that's how the plan is going to work. Eastern Bergen County, it'll slowly work its way west. I just know that just having worked in the RF side and how they look at cash and how they work out the deployments. So I have not looked at that exactly, but I could do. I have predictive heat mapping. I could try to figure out how many utility poles based on population density that each carrier will be coming into the area. But specifically to answer your question directly, you deserve a direct answer. I have not seen the actual plan yet.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the council still has to decide which way to go with this. So that's why I was wondering whether or not you had seen a plan already or anything that was designated. And so the number of poles is really a linear thing rather than it is a household or number of connection type thing.
So the big issue is that the poles have a limited propagation. So because of the nanotechnology, and I think I gave an analogy to someone today about it. Imagine AM radio being LTE, which it's not a real problem, but it gives you understanding. And AM radio goes over vast distances, very low quality, you know, it sounds very crackly, but it goes over very long distances. And FM radio being 5G, better clarity, much better fidelity and clarity, but limited distance compared to AM radio. And just look at it that way. So 5G is going to have a very limited area footprint. It'll be about 1.5 football fields. So that's what's driving the spacing of it. But as I mentioned before, it's the density of the areas and also affluence that kind of drives the way they roll out the area. So in 1.5 football fields in Cliffside Park, for example, or Bayonne, which is also where they're rolling out, there's a lot more households than, for example, in your Mawang, where you're spaced 3 acres apart or whatever it is. Saddle River, 2 acre lots. You don't get too many in 1.5 football fields in Saddle River compared to Cliffside Park, for example.
Yeah, so in answer to the question, it really is a linear identification, rather than households or numbers of, number of people or population that decides how many poles they're going to need and what they're going to use.
In part, yes, in part. But when a lot of these households go over to 5G, it becomes ever more information being drawn from it. It will start being a population issue. So for now, just think 1.5 football fields. But as new devices come out, self-piloting cars, things of that nature, you may have to start making the sites closer together based on population and density. So yes, you're right in part, and then also in the future, it will be driven by density.
Okay. All right, I have no further questions. Thanks.
Of course.
So I just had a couple of questions, Peter, and I just had the opportunity. Obviously, this is the second time I'm hearing and seeing a presentation. So I just had a question relative to the FCC mandates. Is that because they're all advertising 5G and people think they have 5G? And in fact, they don't? Is that the reason that this has now become an issue?
An issue with rolling out the technology, Mayor?
Yeah, the mandate to get this done now.
Well,
Like
it's always, the FCC always, so basically the way it works with carriers, the FCC owns the bandwidth in the country. They do auctions, and then the carriers come in, they bid on it. As a condition of winning it, not only do you have to pay a whole lot of money to get that bandwidth because they compete against, it's like an RFP and everyone comes in and bids against it, any of the major carriers, they get awarded it. But the other part of it is that they have to deploy. They just can't sit on it. They want, 5G is beneficial to the economy. It's going to bring all the different innovation. Think very interestingly, just 15 years ago, the largest companies in America were carbon petroleum companies, Exxons. Now they're Amazons, they're Ubers, they're eBays. All that was brought on by 4G. 5G is going to bring on very, very vast changes in technology that we don't even predict right now. I mentioned autopilot cars, that's foreseeable. But, there's going to be a whole lot more that 5G is going to bring on. So it's partly the beneficial use of it. If you're going to issue out the spectrum, they will make sure the carrier deploys it, and the United States gets the advantage. We were one of the earlier adopters of 4G, and you see our economy is far away, one of the most advanced in terms of our companies, all the largest in the world, and that's because 4G being deployed. And that's also similarly, the FCC wants 5G deployed, so we have the edge, competitive edge in the world in terms of trade and innovation. Did that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes. So it's funny that the deputy mayor raised the issue of the small nodes in the Willard district, because I remember we had asked to send a letter to everyone within 200 feet. And my recollection, I see Chris Rudishauser is in the meeting. He's blocked out, though we don't see his face. But my recollection is we sent the letter out to everyone within 200 feet, and we didn't hear anything from anyone that was a complaint. It's just how I remember it, which always surprised me because I thought we were being so considerate and proactive and making certain that everyone was keenly aware of what was going on in the neighborhood. We didn't hear anything because everybody really just wanted the service. But I also understand now that we should have been likely charging for those nodes to be in our right of way.
Well, you're right, Mayor. Yeah, so Bergen County, I'm working with them right now with the other carriers about remedying it, but they basically didn't understand that that they were entitled to collect money for each utility pole. And certainly they're not going to tell you that. The carriers are going to tell you that So in some cases now I'm remedying that. I'm working with the carriers to kind of make sure Bergen County gets paid for their county roads in the right of way. And I just like to see you not make that mistake, ahead of time. And that can be done with a well-drafted ordinance and make sure that's very clear about you get the beneficial use of, offset for them using your right of way. I mean, they're going to be there. They're going to start decommissioning their towers and they're going to be operating your public right of way. So why shouldn't you be allowed to get some sort of benefit from the monetization at least?
Right, sure. Okay. So I think,
I have more questions.
oh, sure. Go ahead, Pam. Sorry.
Mr. Lupo, the ordinance that we have in our packet, is that something you drafted?
Yes, I forwarded that. I shared with them. That is something I drafted. Yes, I drafted it. I circulated with the carriers to make sure I got their kind of, I didn't want to surprise them with it. I took more than the FCC, kind of spells out. And it was about 6 months worth of negotiation with the carriers. But yes, I drafted it and I got it approved with the carriers.
Okay, then if I understand you correctly, the FCC decided this is healthy and we can't question it. And we can't say no to 5G at all. But in my quick research this afternoon, I found a report from a New Hampshire legislative committee that came out in November with certain recommendations. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, I'm not.
You're not?
No, not the New Hampshire. No, I'm not familiar with this.
Okay, because I was wondering if their recommendations informed your draft at all.
Yeah, no, so I am not. My draft is more informed by representing municipalities, going on calls like this, Zoom calls, and kind of getting, one, it's from being in the industry for 15 years, and cancer from electromagnetic emissions from towers is nothing new. So I'm familiar with these concerns and arguments people make. So 5G is not really any different from 4G, in terms of people's concerns. So this is more 15 years worth of experience being an expert, a witness for the carriers and fielding these type of questions. And then also now being on the municipal side, representing 20, 30 municipalities, going to Zoom calls, going before elected officials and hearing concerns. So it's a combination of my experience on the carrier side and then now being on the municipal side that really informed me and provide the framework for creating and drafting the ordinance.
So what does shot clock mean?
What does the shot clock mean?
Yeah.
Shot clock is a triggered, shot clock means a defined timeline, usually triggered when the carrier comes in with an application or notifies the municipality that intends to put up a tower. So that is with a shot clock. And there are two ones I mentioned before is a 60-day shot clock. That's where they co-locate on existing infrastructure. That's a utility pole already in the public right away. It's 60 days, and then it's 90 days for a new pole that they put into the right of way. And begins, as you said, when they express a clear intent to go in there, and then if you don't meet that 60 or 90 days, you're in violation of the FCC ruling.
I also wanted to mention that Mr. Rogers did look over the ordinance, so he was, he did have a chance to review it.
And just to share, I think that one of the last applications, I know actually the last application I heard on the Board of Adjustment was the cell tower on Route 17. And we heard that application. We had at that time the right to vote for or against, and right after that the law changed and it became, you can no longer deny. So I hear exactly what Peter is saying, because that was something that that popped up back in, I guess, 2014, 15.
We dealt with something like this.
So I think that the reason we,
sorry,
yeah.
Susan,
and I think that,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Matt, you go first. It's okay.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I didn't mean to interrupt. We dealt with something like this back post Sandy with regard to PSE&G and the rerouting of the telephone poles. The what I'd call the super poles that came through the Hope down Maple Avenue through Hope Street, then out to 17. The same issues were raised, not only raised from certainly the aesthetic aspect of this, as well as the aspects of potential physical, environmental harm, smells from the resin that's on the poles, and a number of other things. And we found out, then, even though we kind of knew it by law, but we found out then that most of the issues from an environmental and health standpoint rest with the FCC, and we don't really have much of a say in that. There's a lot of studies that are put out with regard to it. Not that you can knock yourself out, because every one of them is important. Every one of those studies is interesting, but at the same time, they are kind of superseded by federal regulation with regard to these things. So we know a little bit about that. We know a little bit about the efforts to try and handle this and take it on administratively. If the council is willing to, at least, obviously we have to take some action with it. If the council is willing to work with Mr. Lupo, I think, conversations with him with regard to maximizing the possibility of any favorable provisions and favorable positions that we can get would be worthwhile, because having somebody that has done it before is a big help. So.
Yeah. And as I think that Heather knows how much I despise special public meetings in the middle of a work session, but I felt that this was so important that we added it tonight and invited Peter here to do this presentation, because I thought it was really something we needed to get ahead of and have our ordinance in place, because we just don't know when this will be upon us, and we certainly don't want any surprises, and we want the ability to at least have that understanding and the ability to certainly monetize as well. So,
and
anyway.
the fact that they are in Eastern Bergen County and moving west, they'll be here shortly. So,
I'm going to guess, if I was just, again, I have not, I know I was asked a pointed question about the actual build plan and how soon it would be, I'm going to guess 6 to 9 months, I was guessing. And I'm dealing with a municipality, just Bergen County, it was Eastern Bergen County, who already got approached, and they kind of stuck. They got, they didn't have an ordinance in place, and they jokingly asked me, where was I 6 months ago? And they contacted me, unfortunately, and they're kind of stuck now with, they already granted partial consent to one of the carriers, and now I think I could kind of make the best of it, but you're much better off having an ordinance in place before they approach you than, especially with the shot clock, than if you don't, because you're kind of stuck with the default FCC setting than you are, if you have an ordinance in place. So anyway, but that is in fact true.
Okay. All right. So why don't we just continue on, and Peter, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
We are going to, with that, we are going to conclude the presentation. If nobody else has any questions, right? We're good? We're good to go? Okay.
I guess
all right.
That's one Walsh.
Yeah, so I guess my only question is, are we going to hear from anybody else with a similar business plan? Are we going to, this is the first I heard the presentation, so I'm imagining that there's others out there that do similar business.
I don't know. And remember, it's free of charge to us. There is no fee to it.
I'm sure you have competitors.
Northwest Bergen managers, administrators have met, and we've, asked if any of us or anyone knows of others. Some of them are council members in other towns. No one else is really aware of this service.
I could tell you I'm very lucky in that I am, there's one other attorney in South Jersey, kind of the Philly area, and his name's Dominic Faleco. He's the only other attorney I know who specializes in this law. I've been very lucky to find a niche, and find an area where there's not a lot of attorneys or in this space. So I've been very lucky in that way, but certainly, of course, it's, your discretion.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
I can understand where time appears to be somewhat of the essence, but I would like to make sure that the public has enough time to weigh in, give their input. I don't want to rush this. it's very complicated. And I know I have a lot of reading to do.
Well, the public's
No.
not going to award the contract.
Right.
The council's going to award the contract. And
Yes,
we have
I
no
understand that.
choice. We have no choice. We have to accept it regardless.
And I will make myself available when it comes to permit discussion, if you want to retaining me to be your expert consultant to go there and go ahead and discuss this with members of the public, if that's something if you do want to retaining me.
Yeah, I think that this is something that this is a clock ticking, and this is a matter of time. And as someone that has been on that side of it with the Board of Adjustment and seeing these types of applications and how they come in, and especially given the change in the law, I think that this is upon us, and we should be acting and taking a proactive approach. So, I mean, we're going into a special public meeting, so I guess everybody has to decide what they think is in the best interest of the village and to protect our interests. So, all right, Peter, Bernadette, did you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, good. All right, Peter, thank you so much. We're going to make a motion to suspend the work session and convene a special public meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Everyone have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you, Peter. So I think we need a motion to suspend the work session and convene a special public meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Perrin,
Yes.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Eden,
Here.
yes,
Yes.
Walsh, Knudsen.
Yes. Okay, with that. Village Council, Village of Ridgewood, special public meeting, April 28th, 2021. The time is 9:06 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled. Same is provided by law of a schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Councilwoman Perrin,
Here.
Councilwoman Reynolds,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Seaton,
Now I'm here.
Councilwoman Walsh,
Here.
Mayor Knudsen.
Here. I move the first reading of ordinance 3860.
Second.
Perrin,
No.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Seaton,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
Knudsen.
Yes, so ordered. Will the clerk please read the ordinance 3860 by title?
An ordinance to provide for the amendment of the revised general ordinances of the Village of Ridgewood with the addition of a new chapter entitled Telecommunications Facilities in the Public Right-of-Way.
Someone needs to move it.
I move that ordinance 3860 be adopted on first reading and that May 12th, 2021 be fixed as the date for the hearing thereon.
Second.
Perrin,
I might vote for this in the future, but not tonight. No.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Seaton,
Yes.
Walsh,
I have a similar comment to Pam. I mean, it's the first time hearing it all, and even though I was able to read stuff, I'm not comfortable voting tonight, so no.
Knudsen.
Yeah, I'm voting yes, and I'll just say that this is only setting a date for the public hearing. So there's certainly several weeks in between that people have the opportunity to review, but this is just a motion to set the date of a public hearing and just as a reminder of procedural, but yes.
Okay, we have one resolution. If you would like, would like to consider on a consent agenda. I could read it by title, or I could read the entire resolution.
I think everyone's had the packet and should have had the full resolution, so you can just read it by title.
I'd rather have the full reading of it.
Okay, very good. Resolution 21-110. Whereas it is necessary for the Village of Ridgewood, the village or the municipality to retain a consultant, the consultant or designee to provide municipal services with regard to the village's communication carriers as carrier agreements and wireless services with regard to the village's wireless communications facilities, in particular, the installation of next generation mobile networks in the public right of way are beyond the scope and expertise of professionals normally utilized by the village. And whereas pursuant to the municipal land use law, NJSA 40:55-53.2, application review and inspection charges shall be limited only to professional charges for review of applications, review and preparation of documents, and inspections of developments under construction and review by outside consultants where an application is of nature beyond the scope of the expertise of the professionals normally utilized by the village. And whereas the village desires to appoint Hoplite Communications LLC with offices at 197 Route 18, Suite 3000, East Brunswick, New Jersey, 08816, as a consultant and designee to provide municipal services with regard to the village's communications carriers. And whereas the consultant has provided a copy of its summary of services attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. And whereas Hoplite Communications will serve as a consultant at no cost to the village for the term of April 22nd, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. And whereas all compensation paid to the consultant for services rendered to the village will be paid by the communications utility carrier. Now therefore be resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood, Bergen County of Bergen, and State of New Jersey, that Hoplite Communications be and is hereby appointed as a consultant to the Village of Ridgewood to provide municipal services with regard to the village's communication carriers as set forth in its summary of services attached hereto and made part hereof. And be it further resolved that the consultant will provide its services to the village at no cost to the village for the term of April 28th, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. And be it further resolved that all services rendered by Hoplite for the benefit of the village will be paid by the communications utility carriers. And be it further resolved that this resolution to appoint consultant is made without competitive bidding in accordance with the local public contracts law, specifically NJSA 40A:11-6.1, because the value of the goods or services does not exceed the bidding threshold. And be it further resolved that the village clerk be, and she is hereby authorized and directed to forward a copy of this resolution to Peter J. Lupo Esquire upon its passage. Be it finally resolved that this resolution is available for public inspection in the village clerk's office in the Village of Ridgewood.
I just want to point out that in both cases, it's April 28th is the date. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Maylander?
Yes.
The introduced ordinance 3860, will
Yes.
that be on the website? And where can residents find it on the website?
We can put it in the narrative part at the bottom and we'll do a link to it.
Okay.
So that people can look there, because that'll be easier than trying to go to the ordinances and everything. It'll just make it easier. So that's where we'll put it.
Okay, on the resolution, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? May I have a second?
Sorry, second.
Perrin,
No, not yet.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Seaton,
Yes.
Walsh,
No.
Knudsen.
Yes. Okay, so we'll take,
And a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
so we are back on our regular agenda. I just have to go shut my window. It's pouring out, so just excuse me one minute.
Did she say it's pouring out?
It is, yeah.
I'm looking out the window. There's no rain.
Oh, it's like pouring over here, but I heard.
I can hear it. It's pouring.
Rain detection going off.
Are you serious, Barney?
There's no rain. I'm looking out on my front.
But the lightning detector over at the high school was going off nonstop,
I just heard
and then
that.
it started pouring.
Okay, we'll start with Ridgewood Water. The first is the proposed increase in the water connection fees. Annually, the connection fees charged by water utility for new connections are recalculated at the end of each budget year. And we actually hired the village auditor to perform the recalculation of the fee. And the new proposed fee is $3,806. It was $3,730. The fee is applied per unit of new development and charged in addition to the cost associated with the physical connection materials and labor costs. So this is an ordinance that we have to adopt.
Okay. Any questions?
Is that a one-time fee for each person who moves in?
It's only for new residents or a new commercial building. If there's an existing house on the property, they don't get charged twice. So a one-time fee.
And it will apply to the multifamily housings?
It has already for all four.
Okay. The next item is the award of contract for software support for the Scada system. We awarded a 3-year contract for Scada software in 2019. This is year 3 of a 3-year contract. Is to Emerson Process Management Power and Water Solutions of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's an amount not to exceed $18,922.97. They're a sole source provider of this software. The funding is in the water utility budget, water utility operating budget.
Okay. Questions? Moving on.
The next one is award of contract for water billing and data collection and processing services. In 2017, the village awarded a 3-year contract with optional years for 2021 and 2022 for water billing and data collection services. The recommendation from Mr. Calby is to award the first option year to Computil Inc. of Shelton, Connecticut. They were the sole bidder. It's in the amount of $237,395. The funding is in the water utility operating budget.
Any questions?
The next item is a contract under state contract to Hatch Company of Loveland, Colorado for the purchase of a service contract and supplies for maintenance of chlorine, pH, and phosphate analyzers and repair and replacement supplies. It will exceed the statutory limit of $17,500. Therefore, the funding is in the water utility operating budget, and the amount not to exceed is $82,503.49.
I have a question. So we provide analysis in-house, and this is buying the maintenance and the labor of the equipment that we use? Is that what this contract is?
This is the physical equipment that's at each well and treatment plant. It's separate and apart from the actual lab tests that we take and do in-house and send out. This is live data for pH and the phosphate concentration of chlorine at each site.
Okay.
You're okay, Pam?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That clarifies it.
The next one is awarding a contract under state contract to Hatch Company of Loveland, Colorado to purchase a lead analyzer. It's necessary to monitor and report levels of lead, of dissolved and total lead in the system, non-compliant samples required for system operation. The amount not to exceed is $58,449.98, and the funding is in the water utility capital budget.
Questions?
Yeah, I do. Looking at their price quote, they have a lead analyzer for 27,000+, and then below it, it says lead analyzer PB2, and that's another 22,000+. And I gather we're talking about one analyzer. What is that second item?
I believe the one is for the dissolved lead and the other is for the total lead. But I'll clarify that for you before the next meeting.
And for this lead analyzer, what's the life expectancy of it?
That's a good question as well. I'll get you that answer.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to parking. The item there is the extension of the grab and go parking spaces. As you may recall, we did adopt a resolution in October of 2020, which extended the grab and go parking spaces from November 1st, 2020 through May 1st, 2021 for a price of $1,500 per space. At this time, the village council must make a decision as to whether or not to continue this program for the next 6 months from May 1st, 2021 through October 31st, 2021 for the same price per space. The spaces have been sponsored by businesses and individuals in the past, and my understanding is that this practice will continue.
Any questions, anyone?
No, I'll just say that it's like a welcome mat. I love going downtown to be able to run errands and just park in the grab and go and get done what I need to. It makes it much easier to go downtown.
So I have a question. Why don't we just go to like December 31st? Why do we go to October?
We would have to change the price unless you're willing to go 8 months for the $1,500. That's up to you. I think Mr. Rooney would probably.
Oh, I see, because we did it based on that pricing.
Correct.
Oh, because because that window. So what would, I mean, to me, why, because they have to keep re-upping that application, is that the
We could do
case?
it till December 31st. My question for Mr. Rooney, though, would be what is the cost for those additional 2 months and what would the total cost then be?
So it's $250 a month.
Okay.
So it'd be another $500 for additional 2 months.
So it'd be $2,000 per space for 8 months.
Right.
So can we just offer it both ways? Is that a problem? Or can we just,
That's
can
a
we say
problem.
you can?
I think we need to
Still
be
have to.
consistent because otherwise some of the spaces will be 8 months and some will be 6 months.
Right.
So when the 6 months run out, then for 2
Yeah.
months, those spaces won't be available anymore. And
Yeah, I
that
kind
would
of
be,
feel like I kind of feel like let's go to December 31st. That's just my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has a October re-upping this again. Does anyone agree?
So I guess my question would be, Pam, you know, and this was a concern that the mayor had when we started this all. Now that the governor has lifted indoor some of the regulations and you can have up to 250 people indoor, I think we maybe want to shift to having people come downtown and park their car and stay for a while and kind of get out of the behavior of only grab and go. And I know that grab and go is great, but you know, people are hesitant and slowly kind of coming out of their past behaviors of COVID. And, you know, even with the corrals, which I guess we'll talk about, you know, they can have people indoors again now. So, you know, maybe we focus on moving forward with getting back to normal, so to speak.
Well, I have two things to say. One, the grab and go encourages people to use our garage if they're going to be staying for longer in town. And I think we want to fill the garage. And I am a little concerned. I'd like to hear from the business owners how they would feel about paying a longer term. Is it so much of a hardship on them that they can't afford it? We have a CBDAC meeting tomorrow morning, and I'd like to put it to them and see how the business community feels about it.
Yeah. So
Since
let me
they're
just
putting
say,
the bill.
let me just say this. I'm gonna take my 2 months off the table because Councilman Walsh is exactly right. Because what in my mind, and I can only tell you, it's just a pattern of behavior that you establish, that and thank you for reminding me that I said that. So I think we are encouraging people to park in and grab and run out and kind of, it's a behavioral change. And when somebody has to park and maybe they'll put, whether they put 50 cents in the meter, if they pay for that amount of time, they might actually make another stop. If they put $1 in the meter, they actually might wind up spending a little more time, and then translates into maybe another additional transaction that may not have otherwise occurred. So I'll take the 2 months off the table and go back.
You're breaking up.
We're breaking up.
Mayor, you'll have to repeat yourself. We didn't hear you.
I
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you at all.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? I don't know. Shoot. Okay. Tech support. Is that
No, we
better?
can hear you now.
No?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe turn your
So
video
I
off.
think that I'm going to shut the video off, you think?
Yeah, shut the video off for a second, 'cause on mine, that's what sometimes you get. good
Okay. So is
video.
that better now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me take the 2 months off the table and just go to the October 31st, because Councilwoman Walsh is entirely accurate. And I appreciate that she reminded me that I said we want people to really park and stay, not grab and go. And as we are coming out of this, we as a council should be finding the way forward to allow people to come back into town and not encourage this kind of just parking and jumping out and taking care of business within that little 5-minute window of opportunity. So I think that maybe we go through October 31st, or however we approach this, but start to dial it back a little. Anyone else?
No, I would agree with that. I was going to say that we should probably go with the 6 months. That's planned. That's already here, because of the fact that we're not quite out of it yet, but we're coming out of it, and you don't know if you're going to get a third or fourth wave or something like that comes back. So I think in 6 months' time, we'll probably be able to, it's the end of October, so we'll be able to see if this thing's actually coming back or if we're getting more towards normal. And hopefully everything's getting back to normal, and then this will at least give the businesses that are utilizing those spaces time to realize that this was a temporary thing for COVID, because we do want to encourage people to stay in the downtown and visit as many shops and restaurants as they can, and take it from there and just see kind of what happens in the next 6 months. But again, this is temporary, and so just give everybody else enough chance to plan around that.
So is everyone in agreement then to extend it for the 6 months?
I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so it looks like it's unanimous. So we will have a resolution on May 12th. However, I have indicated that it will start May 1st. So, and I know that there are people who are working on getting sponsors right now. So now we can go back to those people and let them know exactly what the fee is going to be, and that it will be extended through October 31st. Thank you. The next one is under budget. This is to award a contract for horticultural supplies for Parks and Recreation Department. They went out for bid. They received 1 registered plan holder and 1 bid was received. The sole bid was from Site One Landscape Supply of Mahwah, New Jersey, not to exceed a total of $48,500. $40,500 comes from the Parks and Recreation budget, and then $8,000 comes from the Project Pride budget. The sole bidder did submit a complete bid package, and they were also the horticultural vendor for 2019 and 2020. It's funded from the 2021 operating expense budget for Parks and Recreation, and then the $8,000 from the Project Pride budget.
I had a question on this one. There is a number of trees for the downtown that are, I think, a part of this.
I see.
Yeah. So are they going to be planted in the tree wells without any additional work being done with the tree wells? I say that because we have a lot of empty tree wells downtown because trees aren't surviving in those. And the Shade Tree Commission has worked for years to determine that you have to kind of redo the soil and put in root guards to keep the sidewalks down and maybe drains to water the trees so they survive, because it's a tough, it's even structural soil, which we use at the garage, was a thought that maybe we'd be using throughout the downtown so that trees will survive. So are we now just going to plant trees in the tree wells without doing anything and hope for the best?
I think we should not do that. I think we should make sure that the tree wells are going to be able to sustain the trees and allow them to continue growing. So, and actually I have not had a report from our arborist as to how those trees in the structural soil are doing. So I will get that for the council and let you know. And then we can certainly go from there. And of course, the bid includes these, but if we don't have the proper soil to put them in, then we won't spend that money until, or the proper framework to put them in. So.
And then we could also look at not only just the structural soil, because they're still relatively new, but I know there were some test pits that we did include the root guards and drains with the trees, and we planted some trees in those too. So they've been there for a number of years. So I think if we're going to have the arborist go out and look at the trees by the garage, then they should look at I think there's there's at least 3 that we did as test pits to see if we could get better survivability out of these trees when we plant them. So, it might not be necessarily structural soil and a whole big thing you have to do with pulling up the sidewalk and everything else. It could be some of these additions that we made to test out to see if they would work too. But I'd like to see, I'd rather see them survive than plant a bunch of trees downtown and fill up these wells. And then, a year or 2 later, half or more of them are dead because they were put in bad soil. So that's all I would say going through looking at that. And,
I completely agree.
Thank you.
There may be other areas downtown that are not wells that could use trees. And I had another question about 2 of these varieties. The Japanese tree lilac, that's an invasive species, and the purple leaf plum, that is subject to gall. I had to cut 2 down on my property, and they are really subject to disease. If other trees could be substituted in for those 2, that's what I would suggest. And does the contract call for watering? Because if we don't water them, I don't know how long they'll survive.
Well, that's not it's horticultural supplies, it's not watering, but certainly we do the watering, right?
Okay.
Through Project Pride, right?
Can I ask where the shrubs are gonna go?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that information, so I can certainly get it to all of you. I don't know exactly where they wanted to plant the trees or the shrubs, but I can certainly.
Okay. I mean, it's just because there's a lot of the euonymus are, food for deer. So if you're putting it anywhere where they're deer, they're not gonna survive. Plus they do get scale a lot. They're really hard unless you're on top of them and spraying them, which I don't think we're gonna do. I would take out the euonymus. And I agree with Pam, the purple plum trees, they're pretty much decimated in the state of New Jersey. I'm surprised if they even sell them anymore. I don't think they do, but maybe.
Okay. I'll check all this out. I'll get that information.
I just was curious. Can I just ask who put the list of trees together? Just, do we know? Because I don't know much about trees. I admit that it's just a deficit. I don't know. But who organized the list? Because, I'm just wondering. I guess we should find out. who-
List from the
I will
vendors.
find that out as well.
Okay.
And I'll bring it back next week.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. The next one is the policy, and it was allowing balloons in the central business district. During the time when we had the pedestrian mall, there were stores and restaurants outside of that area that were not having customers come in or having people go into the restaurants. So what you have before you is what our existing prohibitions are. And basically it's strings, streamers of flags, pennant spinners, and it includes balloons. And it's basically anywhere they're prohibited within the central business district area. But I'll have Councilwoman Perrin speak to this as well.
Yeah, welcome back, Ridgewood. There's been a lot of discussion about how to help retailers bring the people who are in the pedestrian mall in to buy their goods. And there was a suggestion about use more color, maybe bubble machines, maybe balloons. And so I discussed it with Heather, and she persuaded me that bubble machines will make the sidewalks kind of slick. That's not a good idea. So we're not talking about that. And balloons, a property owner mentioned to me that there is such a thing as reusable balloons. So not single-use plastic, not something that ends up in the ocean. And I sent Heather a picture of these vinyl balloons that aren't very expensive. And if we could relax the ban on balloons, maybe it would help the retailers. I'm just looking for a way to help the retailers. That's all.
Comments, anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see these balloons. Like, do you put helium in them? What do you?
They're not helium, no, they're vinyl.
So it's almost like a statue is what it looked like to me. Is that right? Like kind of like it's just frozen balloon, like in a statue thing.
I heard that you can see it on Wyckoff Avenue. An establishment along Wyckoff Avenue has them. So I mean to drive by and take a look. But they are they come into a stem that then goes into the ground. And then you have to think about, well, where would this be positioned?
So the stem has to go into the ground. I mean, most shops don't have, I would think if they were going to put a balloon up, they'd put it by their front door. There's no place that has the sidewalk goes right up to the door. There's no ground to stick anything in.
I have a call into Tracy Jeffrey to get her input. Haven't heard back from her yet.
Okay.
So just
well,
wanted to raise this issue.
And we can circulate that picture and maybe we can find it on Wyckoff Avenue and get more information.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually brought to Councilwoman Perrin, I believe, by one of our people who owns one of the buildings in town, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The next one is Transit Village. As Councilwoman Perrin mentioned, the Central Business District Advisory Committee has been looking into grant opportunities which are available to New Jersey towns that are awarded Transit Village designation. I'll let her explain it further. I think one of our speakers this evening also gave more information, but Councilwoman Perrin.
So the idea is one of smart growth to make the downtown attractive and vibrant and mixed use. And we already have quite a lot of mixed use. And they are encouraging towns to be less reliant on automobiles. And I've given you samplings of towns that got grants from Transit Village for 2020, and you can see they range in size. One thing that caught my eye is the $40,000 grant for a park. And for instance, here we are talking about our tree wells, and Transit Village is concerned with the tree canopy and the attractiveness of your downtown. And if we could, say, get a grant for structural soil, for grinding our tree stumps out of those wells, or for refurbishing the bus station. I mean, there are a number of things that we could use. There's another one for wayfinding signs. So I think it's worth talking more about the application. You can apply anytime. This task force meets several times a year, and they consider the application. And you do have to have a pre-application meeting. And we would get more of an idea at a pre-application meeting as to what they would want from us. In your packet there, I've given you their considerations for an application and what they're looking for. And so I'd like to meet further with Heather and the subcommittee from the CBDAC to see how we could answer the requirements of the application and see if we can qualify for some for some grant money. I have also attached here the resolution that the village would have to pass in order for us to apply. So does anybody have any questions?
I've read over some of the materials and I really don't know about this. It's not just all about grants. It seems like it's kind of opening the door to more overdevelopment. So it seems like it's something that developers could kind of latch on to, sort of like affordable housing as a tool for them to force through more overdevelopment in a downtown. And we already have 4 structures going up. That's I consider a little bit of overdevelopment, and they're not even online yet. And we don't know exactly what that's going to entail, but it's going to be a lot more traffic, foot traffic, pedestrians, car traffic than we have now. So I don't know if something like this would encourage even more development. And again, give us less of a leg to stand on to try and mitigate that if it does come through. So I have a lot of concerns about the whole Transit Village concept and applying it to Ridgewood.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to add to that. This has come up in the past, and there's been tremendous apprehension. That said, I think before there were any meetings with staff or anybody else about this, I think that maybe the village council should have an opportunity to decide whether or not to give it its blessing, so that we don't take up staff time if the desire is not to proceed. I think
And that's actually why it's here. That's why it's here tonight.
I understand. So I would say, I mean, I agree with the deputy mayor. I see that this is, you can read some of the information. I'd like to personally do a little bit more research and maybe bring it back later on, just so I understand the implications. And I don't think it's always just about grant money, because the grant money may have strings attached that we might not want to be dealing with.
Right. And if they say, okay, you have to have more density, then we would just say, no, thank you.
But I don't think that's what Mike is saying. I think Mike is saying that it opens the door to that opportunity. Is that what I think that's
Right,
what
yeah,
he's
so
saying?
if a developer is looking at it, then they say, you know, during the whole planning process, they could come in and say, well, you know, you have this affordable housing obligation and you're a transit village and you've already approved this and you've gone forward with it. So why would you turn down this development, or why would you try to mitigate it, or anything? It just seems like something that would be an easy hook for them to use to just kind of force this stuff through a little bit more.
If I may, and I think it might be helpful, with regard to Transit Village Initiative, it's a co-sponsored program between DOT and New Jersey Transit to develop around transit sites or transit areas within municipalities. There is a criteria that you got to look at, a number of different steps, a number of different representations that you have to make in order to be considered a transit-oriented municipality. So I suggest maybe taking a look at those, because that's the criteria that they're going to look at before you can even apply for grants. Once you get that designation established, then you can apply for grants. And some of the grants have to do with, pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and for paths for that type of a thing in and around the transit hubs, which in our case would be our train station and in that corridor there. So if you look at the criteria, that should kind of help you out to understand exactly what they're going to be looking for from you. And that might help a discussion and bring it back. So if we could maybe bring it back, but there is, 5 or 6 different items that they look for when you do make your application that you have to answer to. And, the program has been around. There's history with other towns, and it's something that I think you could find out that information you need within a short period of time, because it's not a brand new program. It's been out there before, and we did look at it before, but that's.
Yeah, I know. And I just want to say, and I know we looked at it before, and it's interesting because when we talk about the bikes and the pedestrian, and the one thing we all know is that, my experience is people aren't looking to give up their cars. We just built a garage. And so when we're talking about people giving up their cars, we have a garage that we need to deal with. And then we all know the debacle, at least most of us know the debacle with the bike path underneath the train trestle. So I think that we really need to look at this very, very carefully.
Yeah, and we haven't looked at it since the affordable housing initiatives on the different areas on South Broad, on Franklin. So there's a number of different variables that are in there now that might have an impact on the way it might be looked at in the future. So if you look at that criteria, I think that would be helpful.
Okay,
And I
I'll
think
pass
actually,
around the
thank you,
criteria to you, word for word, so that we can discuss it again. But as Steve Aspero mentioned, we would get credit for what we've already done. We've already built multifamily housings. We've already got affordable housing. We've already built a garage. We have a lot of things that would be to our credit already. So
I think that, again, I think we need to understand the potential implications before and just be very cautious. So why don't, if you have additional information, maybe send it to Heather and then she can distribute. I'm sorry, did Bernadette have a question?
Yeah.
I think you were just waving to me. I was going to wave back.
I was doing this proper protocol. So I guess I have a couple of questions. So I'm curious as to how this links with the programs that we already have in place. So like Complete Street and our Safe Routes to School, because I would imagine that now that we have, and I know the conversation has come up about these complexes that are already existing, that there are going to be new routes to school perhaps for children. And I thought the whole idea was that they were not going to have cars and that we were moving towards a transit village for all of those complexes, and that we were encouraging that they weren't going to have cars, because I mean, anybody that's driven downtown, even during COVID, it's been pretty busy. So I would think our focus should be everybody, again, getting back to work, getting back on the train, getting back on the buses, and working towards something that can alleviate some of the challenges we have. I'm not so concerned about any more development because we really don't have any space left to be developed. So what can we do to gain funds to, kind of take it in a direction that we want, as opposed to somebody coming in and, kind of doing it the way they want. So I kind of look at this as us having some control over exactly what we apply for and what we decide we need. So
that's why I think you should look at the criteria, because that kind of helps you focus on those planning items that they consider to be the important items you have to look at. So
yeah,
I agree. So let's send the criteria, and I think again, I hear what you're saying, Councilman Walsh, but I think that it's important to note that every single one of those sites went in with the ability for each tenant to have 2 parking spaces, I believe. So it was 2 parking spaces per unit, and that appears to be consistent with what's happening. So I'm just,
right.
I think it's important to
not to have those 2 cars. We want to encourage them to have only one, or not even need one if they're going to.
Yeah, I don't think we can, I don't think we can dictate, because, when people come, when they live, wherever they live, when they don't have a vehicle, but they're going to, just the nature of this area, likely need vehicles to go to different places. To the idea that they're just going to be pigeonholed into Ridgewood is likely not realistic. But let's get the criteria, and then we can all look at it.
Yep.
With additional information.
Okay. So the next item is cannabis ordinance. We know the voters in New Jersey approved recreational use of marijuana, and in Ridgewood, it was a vote of 69% in favor and 31% against. This is for adults 21 and older. The village's existing ordinance regulating or prohibiting cannabis no longer is null and void. The village must determine whether to opt in or opt out. And the deadline to do this is August 21st, 2021, which means we would have to adopt the ordinance no later than our July 14th meeting. If the village takes no action, any class of cannabis establishment or distributor will be permitted to operate in Ridgewood and will be considered a permitted use. So there are various classes. There are 6 classes. Class 1 is a cannabis cultivator license. Class 2 is a cannabis manufacturer license. Class 3 is a cannabis wholesaler license. Class 4 is a cannabis distributor license. Class 5 is a cannabis retailer license. And Class 6 is the cannabis delivery license. The delivery, we cannot regulate at all. And this is making a delivery to a consumer. Either the delivery service either delivers, like we get delivery of food and things like that, or the delivery service actually partners with a provider. And then, so you order it through a delivery service directly. And you don't even know who the provider is. Obviously, it's someone who's licensed. If the Village of Ridgewood permits cannabis establishments or distributor operations, the action remains valid for 5 years. After that 5-year period, the village has another 180 days to decide whether to prohibit or limit cannabis operations, but anything that had already been approved in those previous 5 years are now grandfathered in. And they must be allowed to continue to operate even if we decide, let's say we permit retail in a certain area and that's good for 5 years, 5 years expires. Now we said we don't want to have retail anymore, that any that had been established in that area would continue to exist. If we do permit them, we can enact a local tax, which is up to 2% for a cannabis retailer. And it's based on the receipts. And then it's paid directly to the village in the manner prescribed by the ordinance. If we decide to opt out, it gives the village the opportunity to opt in at any time. in the future. So right now, related to this is the consumption of cannabis items through smoking, vaping, or aerosolizing is prohibited in all places where tobacco smoking is prohibited under the New Jersey Smoke-Free Air Act, as well as any indoor public places such as bars, restaurants, sports venues. So we may adopt an ordinance making it unlawful for any person 21 years of age or older to consume cannabis through other means such as edibles in a public place, and that would include any indoor public place as well. We can basically restrict the use of cannabis to a private residence. If the village council chooses to opt out, the League of Municipalities has provided a sample ordinance. What I do want to let you know is the governor has established a committee, which I think we're aware of. And a few Northwest Bergen municipalities have decided to opt out at this time, and they're going to wait and see what the recommendations of the governor's committee are. Others have already opted out, regardless of what the governor's committee says. And some of them in Northwest Bergen are looking at it more closely and possibly may allow certain types of one of those classes or a couple of those classes to exist. So we do have to discuss this, determine what we want to do, and then put together an ordinance, introduce it and adopt it no later than our July 14th public meeting.
Okay.
A lot of information.
So
Would we be able to restrict where these places are and what kind of places they are? We'd be able to do that through zoning?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be location of the places, right?
You can, you can look at it from the standpoint of health and safety. You can consider geographic relationships to schools, residential areas, and the like. We did, when we had to deal with e-cigarettes and the sale of e-cigarettes and similar type items, non-THC items, we set up the one place where it could be sold, which was over in the, I forget the name of the zone, but it's the zone that includes the strip mall that's along Route 17 between Paramus Road and Linwood Avenue on Route 17 South. This is a little different because you can opt out and not take any action with regard to it at all. You know, if you read the paper and follow it, Paramus has opted in because they see significant tax consequences. Wayne, a pretty big town, has decided to opt out. So, you know, it really is an individual municipal preference with regard to it. And I think to try and limit it down, obviously, we're not going to be looking at being the place where the marijuana, you know, we're not going to be a zone where there's going to be a, you know, a cultivator or a manufacturer or a wholesaler, but we're going to be looking at something much more smaller, or the potential for the sale of it. So you can focus on that and see what advantages that may be. And then if you don't think it's advantageous at all, then, you know, we'll get some information from the league with regard to opting out. But the big thing to remember is the timeline, and you'd rather make your own decision than have somebody make it for you. So we got to talk about it. It might be worthwhile, I know this hasn't been discussed, it might be worthwhile to just set up a council subcommittee on it to deal with gaining information and then coming back to the council with regard to it. So
just to I mean, I remember, I know we did an ordinance, I forget, maybe a year and a half ago in anticipation of this. And to Mike's point, I think it may have been a little longer, but whenever it was in the past.
Yeah.
Right.
So in anticipation of this, we had adopted an ordinance that allowed for the sale along Route 17. But I think that my question for you is, so let's just say we completely opt out. So we are the opt-out village. But somebody says, you know what, I'm going to go for a variance. I'm going to go for a use variance. So somebody could go and do that and go to zoning and say, look,
Well, if you
it's
opt
sold
out
here.
for it, yeah, if you opt out for it, you make reference to that in your master plan. The legislation's clear that the sale of cannabis does not have the same qualification that other items or manufactured things might have for medicinal purposes. It doesn't have the beneficial use status, and it won't. It's part of the legislation for a use variance. So if it's against the
So
master
it can't
plan,
meet the criteria.
it
So
can't. It's going
in
to be
other
difficult
words,
for it to meet the criteria.
meet the criteria. Okay, so that's an important conversation for me, because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, somebody says no, but you can go and do this. Okay,
I think Susan froze.
I mean, for me. What?
You froze for a second and your face was like,
I really have to get better internet. I think somebody's stealing my
5G.
I know I need 5G. I don't know. I mean, my inclination is to opt out and then process how to navigate this, because we could opt out next week and then decide, okay, opt back in. But as long as we do that, we're in a better place than if we decide to do something, then we're going to be stuck with that for 5 years if it doesn't pan out.
we're going to be
My
stuck
only
with it forever. Because if you allow it for 5 years, whoever does it for 5 years, then if you even decide to opt out,
They're grandfathered.
all those places are grandfathered in forever.
That's right.
So I feel like maybe we should just take a more
I think, yeah.
cautious approach.
Yeah, I think you got to. I mean, you got to use the time wisely, but you do have time to really think it through and look at the advantages or disadvantages one way or the other. And there's probably a few different places you can discuss it, because it is part of planning and zoning. So
just so you know, I'm for opting out. My brother-in-law who lives in Colorado is the town manager of his town. He's the Heather, and his town opted out, and he said it's the best thing they ever did. A lot of the towns around them didn't. He's like, they do get more money, they get the tax benefit, but he said they get the crime and everything else along with it. He said if you polled his town, he thinks 99% of the people would say they did the right thing in opting out, seeing what's going on around them in other towns that opted in. So maybe we could have him as a guest speaker.
So and the other thing, I just wanted to ask one more question though, because I know some of the municipalities that Bergen County up here are talking about allowing for cultivation because they have empty factories and such. But a cultivator necessarily doesn't have to be in that specific type of area. I don't know how much space you need. I'm trying to think that maybe, if you have an empty building anywhere, couldn't you be a cultivator?
There are going to be guidelines created from this committee appointed by the governor. And so they'll probably set the regulations and the guidelines for, where it can be cultivated, is my guess.
So then isn't this a little premature then to be even having this? Maybe that's the reason to opt out, because in the absence of those guidelines, then how do you make a decision to say, can a cultivator happen in, one of those storefronts on Route 17? I mean, if somebody said, you know what, we're going to have a little cultivation thing and then sell it on the storefront, so I think in the absence of, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, so in the absence of that information, I feel like maybe this is premature because we really don't know where a cultivator might be able to operate. So, I don't know. Or maybe they're going to tell us you can't be within a certain proximity for of schools or churches, who knows? I don't know what those things are.
Yeah,
So maybe-
and that's why I don't suggest that you make a decision tonight. I think you got to look at it. You got time. Just take the time to really spend looking at the legislation, finding out what information is available, and it very well be the best interest of the village to opt out and not be a part of it. And that's certainly something you should do, but you should do it. We just got to remember the timeline. That's all.
It keeps your options open, because this way you've opted out, you're not committed, but you can opt in at any time if you decide, yes, this is what we want. So.
Well, maybe we opt out, but the mayor brings up an interesting point, and the classes are different. So I think if you were a cultivator, you couldn't have retail sales. So you couldn't be cultivated. You'd be more of a, more of a supplier to people who would, manufacturers who would then package it and send it to the wholesalers. And then you get down to the retail end of it. So the retail end of it could get pretty busy, and you wouldn't want something like that downtown, because you'd have an issue, and you'd probably have an issue just like we do at Starbucks on Franklin Avenue, where the place would be mobbed and there'd be traffic all around it. But if you were a cultivator and you had an empty building and you were just growing it without retail sales, and maybe every so often you had a couple trucks ship it out and send it to the people who are going to package it, and then send it down to the wholesalers and the retailers, that wouldn't be so much activity, and there could be a tax benefit for it. So, it's not such a cut and dry issue. It's pretty complex. So I think it would warrant, a little bit more study.
And again, I think until that commission,
Yeah.
the governor puts those regulations out, we don't know what the decision's going to be.
Right.
I don't know if they know it yet. I think they're working through it right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Which might make sense to opt out for now, but not just opt out and, kind of say, forget it, because again, you could kind of have these low intensity of use cultivator type places that you still could reap the tax benefit for, but you wouldn't have people coming in and out every day, or lines of people trying to buy the stuff. It would just kind of be low key, and you might not really know what's going on there. I don't know.
Yeah. So why don't we just put this in a holding pattern and maybe get a timeline of when we think those regulations will come out?
They're not going to come out before we have to adopt the ordinance.
But how could you not have regulations? How could you adopt ordinances based on regulations that aren't available yet? Maybe it's me.
I mean, I can say that's why the league is saying their recommendation, was to look into it, but to keep your options open, opt out, and you can opt in at any time. Like I said, several of the Northwest Bergen towns are waiting for those regulations to come from that commission, and then they'll make a decision.
So why don't we just next week is a work session, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we just kind of let everybody, think about this, bring it back, and then we can decide whether or not we want to opt out. We have time.
Yes.
But then at least this way we can, maybe have a pulse on what their timeline is, because I think it just is impossible. And it obviously makes more sense to opt out until you have regulations in hand, to my opinion anyway.
Should we also get Chief Lutke's input and see how she feels? Like, if we had a cultivation operation within our city limits, how would that affect the police? Are those places more subject to burglaries? I don't know.
I think that this is kind of just decision that we have to just make once. I think right now, my opinion is just opt out until we have the regulations, because I think you're kind of like just, blindly making decisions without all the information.
Yes.
Well, I'm inclined to do that also.
Okay.
Plus,
So why don't we just
add the I guess it's a separate ordinance that it would have to be consumed in a private residence. Because I know people don't like the smell of it on the street.
Yeah, that would be a separate ordinance. And so that's something else the council has to decide. Whether
Is
you
that
want
part of
to-
opting in and opting out, though? We can do that anytime.
We can do that.
Yeah,
We can do that anytime.
anytime. It doesn't have a time limit.
Okay. All right, so we'll just
Bring
kind
it
of think
back
about
next
this next
week.
week. Yep,
Okay,
sounds good.
fine. Okay, so the next item is under operations. So the first one is the dining corrals. So as you know, we've allowed certain restaurants to expand into the parking spaces directly outside of their store or restaurant. And due to the success, we've had requests from other restaurants to do it also. So I'll have Mr. Rooney speak to the rate structure that he came up with. And also I know Sergeant Chuck is on the call or on the meeting. And so he also has some information to give you about the barricades and setting up the corrals. And, you know, I know we've had some requests on East Ridgewood Avenue and his thoughts on that as well. So I'll turn it over to them.
All right, I'll start. The rate structure that I proposed for the use of these spaces is similar to what we've been using for grab and go. When you do the calculation for the value of a parking space per month, it's $315. For the grab and go, we've been charging $250. So that's roughly a 20 or 21% discount. So I factored that into what the rates would be charged to those buy spaces that are currently using have the corrals around their space in front of their establishments, and discounted it down to $63 a week or $250 a month, which is consistent with what we're doing with grab and go. So I'm just asking council if that's acceptable to them, if they want to see a different rate structure, if they want to do something different. But I think that's consistent with what we've been offering to the entities now that participate in the grab and go.
So, you know, I want to bring this back to what Councilwoman Walsh said earlier, because I think it's relevant to where we're moving, or what configuration of the CBD we're moving toward. So the corrals were a concept to allow the restaurants to have customers with proper social distancing and to conduct business. But as more and more, you know, the number of interior inside occupancy is increased, and, you know, they still have outdoor cafes, you know, there's a piece of this that now allows them to have their interior, their regular outdoor cafes, and then an expansion of their business onto the street, which I don't think was necessarily the intent, because then, you know, is that a practice that we should be doing? Should any business be allowed to then expand their business into the street? So I kind of throw that out there because I just think I need to understand where we're going with this.
I mean, I would agree with you. It was my thought exactly that, you know, they just lifted or are now allowing 500 people outside, 250 people inside. So most of the restaurants now are going to be able to increase their indoor dining tremendously. And as you mentioned, we do have outdoor dining. We have an outdoor dining ordinance. So I think the corrals, while they were good for the purpose, I always looked at it as a short-term Band-Aid while we fought COVID. So I certainly don't think we should be adding any, but I also understand the inequity for those businesses that don't have outside corrals. So I'm more towards phasing them out as opposed to adding more.
My question would be for Bob too. The $315 a month, is that just straight whatever the fee is for the parking space for the amount of time that the meters are enforced, and it doesn't include any overlap. So, you know, somebody puts in $2 and leaves with 50 cents still on the meter, and then somebody else immediately pulls in behind them. Because we don't have individual meter heads, you don't have that extra time that you could kind of piggyback on. Now you're paying for the time that you're going to be there. Maybe use all your time, maybe you leave 10 cents worth or 50 cents or whatever it is. So it doesn't take into account for that overlap, does it?
That's correct. This is assuming a car parked there starting at 9 o'clock in the morning, left at 8 o'clock at night, no movement.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I would be in agreement also. Like this was done to, you know, is kind of like hurry through to help everybody as much as we could through COVID. And, you know, there's a structure that exists. So again, if there is another wave or it does kick up again when the weather gets cold, we could always revisit this and, you know, go back to corrals. But I don't know that it would be, you know, a good idea to make this permanent going forward, because then we're losing parking revenue. We were out almost $1 million worth of revenue last year, and you know we have to close that gap.
So what is the current capacity now inside?
250.
No, what is the percentage?
I don't think it's 250. I think that's for large gatherings like weddings and things like that. Inside, I want to say 50, but I might be wrong. 50%.
I think it's 50% inside.
50% is
I
what
think.
I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think it was 50% capacity as well. So the reason this came up, in fairness, is because as we were going through some of the businesses downtown, one or two of the restaurants on Ridgewood Ave said, well, we don't have the benefit of that, you know, these additional sidewalk that allows us to expand to the left and the right. So the only place we can go, and on Ridgewood Ave, we specifically didn't allow for the corrals because of the parking, not parking, just the traffic. So that's why this kind of came up, but I'm okay to say it wasn't anything that was pressing. It was just whether or not we would want it on Ridgewood Ave. So I'm okay to kind of say dial it back. I mean, I'm okay with that. It wasn't anything pressing. So.
All right. So if we continue it.
Sorry, was Jay here all this time for that? Sorry, that way Jay's here for that.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, if we continue it, the issue is that we don't have enough barricades, right? And I think, and Sergeant Chuck can also speak to the East Ridgewood Avenue request.
Yeah, we're running at the end of our available equipment to start lending out. So that's the main issue. And we kind of fall back to two things. Those plastic barriers being out for that long are going to start getting tired. Obviously, aesthetically, they're not always very pleasing. And even though they have a lot of weight to them, you know, we want to keep them tight because East Ridgewood Ave is naturally narrow in the driving lanes compared to some of the other roads. So that's going to make for some uncomfortable driving downtown. And then as soon as someone double park next to that to go get their food, it's going to create a backup pretty quick. So we were definitely going to suggest that if you guys were going to move forward with corrals on East Ridgewood Ave, that we'd find other avenues or other equipment, maybe revisiting the bollards. I know you guys were really super interested in the speed rated ones. However, if you kind of think of good, better, best, the non-speed rated ones would certainly be better than the Jersey barriers that we had out, the Yodocs that we had out now, and obviously more aesthetic. So that was kind of the thought process if you guys want to move forward with East Ridgewood Ave.
Well,
but that doesn't seem like the plan for tonight.
Yeah.
yeah, the one where I said I stand corrected. Thanks for saying.
I think we're all good with like kind of phasing this.
Do we want to put a date to
Yeah,
terminate?
see the follow-ups. I knew it was in the.
So a date
To end the program.
phase it out completely.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Let's leave it as is right now and monitor maybe over the next couple of weeks where this COVID numbers are going. And I think we're seeing significant declines as everyone is becoming, getting vaccinated. So then we should revisit it in May and start to figure out how we're going to, phase it out. If everything continues on this trajectory, then I would say, let's phase it out.
Okay.
In the meantime.
That sound make sense?
Yeah, my question is, in the meantime, do we want to collect money for April and May? Or even from January to May?
We should always collect money.
Okay, well, we hadn't been.
Right.
So that's what I'm asking. So if you're willing to collect the money, then we just have to do some kind of resolution, I guess, to allow for that.
So I would bill them for the time because they obviously had the use of the facility and people couldn't park there. And there was never an agreement that said you weren't going to pay. It was, well, once we started with once we finished the pedestrian mall back in, the fall, this started to escalate where the restaurants were, seeing that there was still a benefit to maintain these spaces that they had because, things weren't closed down like they were before. So obviously there's a price to pay for the use of those spaces.
Well, I don't think we can retroactively. I would say just going forward for May and June, and then hopefully by July, with all the, hopefully everybody will get vaccinated, that we'd be able to phase it out.
So I thought the restaurants were paying for the parking spaces that they were using. That was always my impression. They weren't paying for anything.
No, they haven't been billed for it. Up until, again, when the pedestrian mall was in existence, they were paying, the chamber was paying for the time and expenses to close the facilities down, and also for revenue losses that were calculated based upon prior experience, usage, things of that nature. When that stopped, the parking, the spaces were still being used. As a matter of fact, the program expanded. We added some additional spaces, but they have not been billed for that yet. But my understanding was there was always going to be a charge to it.
Right. That was my understanding, that they were paying for it. I don't know why they weren't billed for it, because.
Well, the corrals were created originally for restaurants that weren't in the pedestrian mall area, and that allowed them to expand further out so that they had the benefit of additional space. And then it expanded to those who were in the pedestrian mall area and, just wanted it for additional space all during the week and not just on the weekends. So, but again, so we didn't charge, we haven't charged yet, but, I don't know if we charge retroactively. I don't know if we charge, as Councilwoman Walsh suggested, for May and June, and then see where we are.
It's per space, right? So in
Per
theory,
space.
let's just say by Steel Wheel, they have what, like 6 or 7 spaces. So it would be $250 a month times however many spaces there are.
Correct.
Right.
Money.
Wow.
I don't think you can go retroactive, but.
Either.
But we have to start like immediately. We've lost a lot of revenue by not charging.
Just so everyone knows that all the restaurants that were participating in this all were made aware that they can fall under the ordinance for renting the spots for usage, just like any other contractor. So it's not like this is going to be a surprise to them.
And if we use that concept, Jay, if we use that rate, they pay much more because it's a $20 a day per rate, higher than what I've calculated. So I am of the opinion that they should be billed for it, and they've used the spaces.
Yeah, so what you're saying on Steel Wheel for all those.
That would be like $1,500 a month for them. 6 spaces.
It says it's on the spreadsheet. It's on that spreadsheet. Is that $5,600 for Steel Wheel?
That's correct.
Is that how? So they would owe 5,600. The next one, so 3,200, 3,700. That's all on that spreadsheet.
So it's about $16,000.
So I'm not comfortable going backwards because, you know, people were still struggling in those months. And I think that it's really important to not go backwards and you know, $16,000 is revenue, but this was a tough time for people. And, you know, even back in December, I do find that the guy on Ridgewood who was allowed to have the corral, it's interesting because others had a benefit.
Susan, we can't, you're cutting out.
Businesses didn't, and
Susan,
that's
we can't hear
always
you.
my thing is I have that. I don't think I'm sorry.
We didn't hear like the last few sentences or more.
So hopefully that's better.
Yes.
Is that okay? So the fairness issue always pops into my mind that folks weren't other ones didn't have opportunity to go into the street because of their location. And so that's always the thing that troubles me is that some had a benefit while others did not. But I don't think we can go backwards. That's just my opinion. I think everybody seems to agree not going backwards. So but we can certainly go forwards and say, okay, well, this is what it is. And then at least for the next month and then start to phase it out. Because I think it has to be phased out at this point. It shouldn't be forever.
Okay, so certain places, you know, spend a lot of money to get tents and things like that. So are we going to do it for May and June and then say after that it's quite likely they'll be phased out and we'll get payment for May and June? Or are we just going to tell them May? Or what are we going to do?
I would say May and June.
I would say May and June as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because people still are not comfortable. I mean, I haven't been in a restaurant and I don't plan to. You know, I don't know if I'm setting a bad example, but you know, I just in the summer months, it's nice to eat outside.
Okay, yeah, I've been in restaurants. I'll go inside. I'm not too concerned about that.
So, and I just think that at some point, as things get back to normal, knock wood, I think that we start to charge. If things start turning around and going backwards and reverting back to numbers increasing, then at least we haven't completely phased it out. And you know, we can always revert back and pivot on as needed. So I just think start to at least indicate that we're going to phase it out. As far as people buying tents, look, they invested in tents, they were in COVID, and that allowed them to have business. The tents probably paid for themselves, I would imagine. So I don't think, or if they rented them, I don't think that can be our concern at all.
No, I'm just saying, you know, how long they should rent the tents. And so now I know it's 2 months and I'll let them know that it's possible it may be phased out starting in July. That's why I was bringing that up.
Fair. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we'll say that we're charging for May and June. We might quite likely have some that say, okay, then I don't need the corral. And then we'll have fewer corrals than what we had before, which is fine.
Okay.
And then what happens during the pedestrian mall? During the pedestrian mall, can they have tables and chairs on the street?
They have it all the time. All the time, all week.
Yeah, we're just going to phase the street thing, the street dining out. And as far as the pedestrian mall, we're still working through the details on that. So I guess we'll take that one step at a time as well. But at least we phase the other piece of it out. That's the constant.
Okay. So at least we can notify them, you know, this is what's going to exist. Make your decision as to how you want to proceed for May and June. Go ahead, Bob.
One more point. Does council agree on the rate structure that I do the same discount that we're giving grab and go and apply it across the board to these spaces?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And it's only a couple more months, so it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll notify them. Okay. So the next item is the relocation of the New Jersey Transit bus station. So Mr. Rotishauser's here. Hopefully, yes, Sergeant Chuck is still here. Good. So recent meetings of the Central Business District Advisory Committee and also Citizen Safety Advisory Committee, the discussion occurred for the consideration of relocating the bus station over to the area where the train station is. I'll have Mr. Rotishauser discuss a little bit, what the thought process is and what the advantages are. And then also, I know Sergeant Chuck also will give some information about what he sees, as a traffic bureau head in the police department as to how this might improve safety.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. What we have before the council tonight is a proposal to relocate the bus station from over by Van Ness to the train station, primarily in the Willsey lot area. It would make a true intermodal transit hub in the village. The benefits also would include getting the buses off of East Ridgewood Avenue. I have emailed with New Jersey Transit. They are very favorable to this, but they want to see how it goes with you folks. There would be a few extra trips, bus trips. I have gotten a charge from New Jersey Transit. I don't recall if I had it from them in time to forward to you folks as to the exact count. If you haven't gotten it this yet, I'll send it over to Heather for distribution.
We don't have it.
Yeah, all right, I'll send it over.
Okay.
We anticipate if we were to do something like this, we would probably lose about 17 parking spaces in the Willsey Square parking lot. This is offset by the gain of approximately 33 spaces at the train station from when we enlarged the parking lot there. We would gain 6 additional parking spaces back at Van Ness Prospect Street lot where the current bus station is, or where the buses congregate. Is there any questions from the council? Anything I could explain? I'd be happy to give it an attempt.
So then that would be a current net loss of 11 spaces from what we have currently.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then Sergeant Chuck, if you could just speak to, your thoughts on moving the bus station.
Sure. Obviously, we're excited about this proposal. We have been kicking around for a while, Chris. Our main concerns are obviously those buses making the rights and left turns on East Ridgewood Ave. Basically steal our breath every time we see it. Like I just said before, the driving lanes on East Ridgewood Ave are inherently narrow, and those buses are pretty much the same width as the driving lane. So how we don't rip off more doors and mirrors during the year is amazing. And then if you've ever seen that bus make the right turn from Walnut Street to East Ridgewood Ave, it stops traffic while it does it. The other thing is by moving the bus station over, we gain the ability to manage the buses through controlled intersections. Obviously, we're working on improving the corridor on Franklin Avenue. That will help with those buses. And then obviously entering and exiting the bus station by the train station through a traffic light also is a tremendous help with not worrying about making a right and left turn and kind of sweeping into other cars that have the right of way. So these are all very positive things.
Yeah, so I have a whole bunch of questions. I have to tell you, I'm like, this whole plan is to me, just one that I really didn't want to revisit from the last time it was raised, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that the folks on the west side were ballistic because all these buses now are dumped into that area. And it's a difficult bend under the trestle. It's difficult. Are you suggesting that the buses are going to go in which driveway, which entranceway are coming in to the parking lot?
The one down by McMurphy's.
Yeah, so they have to cross in front of all the vehicles coming the opposite direction. They have to make that left into that very narrow turn. Now, I'm going to tell you that as somebody who often parks in that parking lot there to go across the street to shop, I will never go in that parking lot. I will never go in that parking lot. I will never park there because the buses making that turn and that type of congestion and activity to me, and now they're going to come back out and have to make that right to get back under. Where are your wheel bases, Chris? Do we have any wheel measurements to show how a bus is even going to make that turn?
The buses are 45-foot long cruisers from New Jersey Transit. The buses are what Jay said in.
Well, where's this?
What?
I'm asking where is the diagram that shows me those turns, the turn? Where are the diagrams that show me how those vehicles are getting in there?
We did not, in the drawings we prepared, we did not use the turning templates, but they will fit. The drawing we did prepare, we show modifications to the entrance throat or the parking lot, some changes in the curb to better accommodate the 45-footers. And the turn, we also relocate the flagpole on the exit area again, so the buses can make the turn, go to the traffic light, as Jay said, and use the signalized intersection for their subsequent turns, left, right, or straight.
Yeah, I just see this as not a great answer to what is an issue, but I don't think this is an answer to that concern at all. I need to see those diagrams, those templates. I don't see at all how this is a good outcome. And I'm based on the last reaction, I'm surprised that this is being brought up again. And those, it's interesting because as things are getting back to normal, and hopefully we'll see those spaces filled up again at the train station, we're cutting out those spaces that are vital to the businesses across the street. Those spaces, those businesses are critical. I remember when we talked about just removing the last space, so by the liquor store, the last space that we were questioning whether or not it was even a legal space, that 15-minute space, and everyone went ballistic. It was a nightmare scenario because the businesses said we rely on these parking spaces. That's the parking lot for customers. So that's my opinion. But I would be curious to see the turning template.
It would be taking away 17 spaces from, West Side businesses who already, don't have that many spaces to begin with. So how much might something like this cost?
Our preliminary estimate is in the range of about $50,000 for the curb work and paving.
And that's it? Like, do you wouldn't have to do anything with a bus station or anything? That would be the total project?
The bus shelters would be the two-sided ones. Those are the kind that New Jersey Transit would provide.
Okay.
We would not have a fully enclosed bus shelter, partially because of the problems we have seen with the one over by Van Ness.
Okay.
So let me ask you the next question. So now the buses are traveling heading west on Franklin. And now presumably there are bus stops on Franklin because those bus stops need to allow passengers to get to their East Ridgewood Avenue locations. So in the morning, the bus has to have bus stops on the north side of the eastbound Franklin. And then there would have to be bus stops presumably on the south side of the eastbound Franklin, correct?
There already are bus stops. There's one at the corner of Walnut and Franklin, right by the Stop and Shop.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we put a bench there to help the bus using patrons and the senior citizens from Ridgecrest, giving them a resting point in going back and forth to Stop and Shop.
I'm aware of that bus stop, but you need additional bus stops, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so now all those folks that are being discharged to go to East Ridgewood Avenue and in that side of the central business district, because now it's going to increase the number of people that will be discharged at those locations, wherever those stops will be. So all those people now have to cross Franklin, right?
Yes.
No, I think the purpose of moving that bus stop would be that most of the people would be getting off at Woolsey Square and walking underneath the railroad tracks to go to the East Ridgewood Ave spots. So we don't have to add any extra spots on Franklin for the bus stops, because you're creating a hub. You're moving the bus stop from Oak Street to Woolsey Square. So that would be the main stop.
So Jay, you're suggesting that instead of walking one block, crossing Franklin and walking one block to Walnut, that somebody's going to get off at the hub and walk under the train tracks and walk 4 blocks.
Well, no, Franklin and Walnut would still be there. So it would be 2 blocks in either direction from either the Franklin and Walnut stop or the Woolsey Square stop.
I just see this as the people on the west side are not going to be open to this because they're already being put upon with the rest of the mess. So I don't.
Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Rudershauser for drafting this up, because the idea of moving buses from Ridgewood Avenue to Franklin Avenue has been in my head for years, and what would that look like? And this drawing has really helped me focus and understand any kind of concept better. But I have spoken to just about every merchant on Woolsey Square and on Godwin. And what they ask me is, can we make that employee parking over there by Woolsey Square? I mean, they don't want to lose that parking.
Yep.
And what I also see from this drawing is that we would lose the greenway in that loop and sacrifice it to parking. And I don't see the point in paving over that area. Even if you put in trees, it's not as much green as what we have now. And can you hear me, or am I breaking up?
No, you can hear you.
Yeah, so more impervious surface, I'm not in favor of. So I think it was a worthwhile discussion, but I'm not in favor of it.
So I'm going to apologize if anybody thinks I'm being harsh. I just think we've been down this road before, and I'm just a little surprised that we were traveling down it again. Sorry.
So, I mean, I would agree in terms of we worked so hard and really caught a lot of comment from adding the 35 spots. So to now take the 17 spots away from the area that we worked so hard to put them in, is kind of going backwards. And certainly those businesses really need those spots over there. So and I agree with Pam. While it's a nice design, I think we have to kind of think a little bit more as to what we can do to solve our bus issue, because I would hate to really hinder the progress that they're making on the west side at this point.
I agree.
Okay. So the next one is the West Glen Avenue safety improvements. So the engineering division has prepared a conceptual plan for the installation of sidewalks along West Glen Avenue between North Monroe and Heights Road, which does not have sidewalks presently. As we know, it's a primary pedestrian conduit from the Willard area to the railroad tracks, the central business district, and the east side of the village. I'll have Mr. Ruthershauser indicate there are some challenges along that route, and I'll have him give that information.
Yes, this has been a request by a number of residents and the Citizen Safety Advisory Committee for the consideration of sidewalks between the locations that Heather just mentioned. This is not an easy location. Aside from the traffic volume on the street, we do have slope issues, particularly along the eastbound direction in some of the portions. In the westbound direction near 141 West Glen, we have an open water course that we can't approach because it's DEP protected. So the sketch that our office prepared and was presented to the council shows how the sidewalks could go in on both sides to where they're possible. When we get to some of the steeper areas, we're going to have to design a retaining wall system. Some of those steeper areas, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, residents have carved parking spaces in just off the street. We're going to have to work with that. Currently, we have $50,000 in capital funds as kind of like seed money for this project. That'll get some of the work done, certainly not all of it.
Did you say 50,000?
50,000, 50.
Okay. I mean, to me, this seems like 50,000 per property. I can't imagine the cost of this.
No.
Are you saying the retaining walls are going to be who's going to be responsible for the cost of the retaining walls?
Well, that is, again, that's something for the council's consideration. They could be supported by the council, or what the village has done in the past, way past, is done a sidewalk assessment where the cost of the improvements would be assessed to the property owner. That also is generally not going to be very popular.
Yeah.
But
I
when
mean,
you do
retaining walls are very expensive.
well, we're looking at modular block. We're not looking at cast and place walls.
I think the village would have to probably bear the cost of that, because I mean, putting in sidewalks and charging back to the property owner is one thing and under normal conditions. But if you're talking about retaining walls and all these other things that are necessary to support the sidewalks, and then whacking the property owners with all that, they're really not going to be happy. But I do support the idea. I think, it's well traveled and it's dangerous. So, I'd be in favor of the village figuring out how we can move forward. The spots that are carved out for some of the residents up there, would they be eliminated, or would they be able to be retained somehow?
We're going to try to retain those parking spaces. In some areas, we would cut more into the hill and give them like a double driveway. Take a space that currently might be parallel with the street, make it perpendicular with the street. For example, that's shown at our sketch for number 176, a little bit for number 172 and number 180, West Glen, to give you an idea. Again, the residents there have carved in those spaces. We would want to try to preserve them for them as best as possible while providing a sidewalk.
So now, so that means, so in order for them to get out of the driveway, so the other way, when they're just carved in, they just kind of drive around and they pull out, right? Now they're going to back out onto West Glen. Is that how that works?
They would have to either back out, or if the driveway was wide enough and they had a smaller car, they can turn around in the driveway.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
West Glen is posted 25 miles an hour.
Right. And nobody drives that, or very few people drive 25 miles an hour on that road.
So let's ask Jay that question, because is he there? He's muted.
He is.
So
I'm
Jay,
here.
you know, we always hear the complaints about West Glen and the speeding on West Glen, and so as we're adding, you know, sidewalks and now driveways where people may or may not be able to do a K-turn in their driveway and then pull out or back out, how do we, what options do we have to get people to slow down? I know this is about the sidewalk, but I think it's a pretty big issue on Glen. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the heavier enforced areas that we work on. However, enforcement there is tough because it is narrow. You know, there's nowhere for really us to get our radar units kind of lined up with the cars going in a certain direction.
Right.
So I know there's a couple residents that are up the hill a little bit that keep complaining that we're not there, but we are. They just don't see us.
Mhm.
I haven't really seen the plans to see what'll happen there, but you know, with anything, we can always do some line painting, try to steal some more space that way. I think the sidewalks will naturally start narrowing people's field of views, so that might help a little bit. We can certainly do some sign enhancements on on Glen Ave too. Particularly going downhill is a little faster than going uphill.
Right. It's the downhill thing. It's true.
Yeah. So there's always things that we can work on. So we can certainly throw those in there. I know Chris is also working on traffic light improvement on the top of the hill. So I think that might help also.
Okay.
Could we get more room in if this green strip were taken away? Do you have more room to work then?
Yeah, we put that in because to give it more a residential feel. Yes, we can put the sidewalks right to the back of the curb. That's how the sidewalk is in portions of West Glen from, I think, Heights down to Hillcrest, and then under the trestle to Oak Street. There isn't the parkway strip, shall we say. We did design with a parkway strip. We do show the potential for putting in street trees. Again, that softens the streetscape. However, we can make it more harder scape.
Yeah, I kind of like the greenway because I feel like, especially with the cars coming fast, I mean, assuming that you can slow them down, it feels like a little bit safer. Maybe it's not really, maybe it's not. It just feels like there's that little bit of
Right. Yeah. I mean, picture you're on the sidewalk and between you and the street, there's nothing but curb. And there's cars whizzing by that I wouldn't want my kids walking, to school or whatever like that.
That's how the sidewalk is from Heights down to Oak Street.
Yeah, no, and I know, but because Heights down to Oak Street, it's just a little bit, it's a little bit different than Glen, don't you think? I mean, I think it's a little bit different. Glen is just a faster road.
I'm referring to the portion of Glen.
Right.
From Heights down to Oak.
Yeah. Where this work is mostly from Heights up to North Monroe.
That's the new section that Chris did last year.
Okay.
How do the
Yes,
kids who live on West Glen walk to school now? Like, what school district is that? Is that Willard?
That I'm not familiar with. I'd have to check the school walking plan, but I do not have that committed to memory.
Yeah, it's Willard, because I have friends that live along there, their kids. So what they usually do is they cross and they'll go up Alpine and kind of wind through. It's Willard.
So. So anybody have any other questions?
I mean, I'd like to, I wish, does anybody have the letter that that gentleman wrote that I think Donna read at the beginning? What were his concerns?
That the landscapers and the FedEx people and visitors don't have any place to park. And that it's dangerous because they'd be, I don't know, crossing from somewhere.
Right, like if there was a FedEx delivery, they just,
Right.
and this was done, they just pull up on the side of the curb and drop it off and the road would be partially blocked, but I guess they do that everywhere. Like how do they deliver on East Ridgewood Avenue? Probably the same way.
They block traffic.
So I just want to go back to one thing. So Chris, I can see on the map what that there's no green strip on. So what you're saying is, do you feel that that's a safety issue at all?
The lack of a green strip or not?
Yeah, the lack.
It's not so much a safety issue, but where we had to put it in, we had no other room because we had retaining walls that were right next to the road. And we did not want to undertake the cost of shifting those retaining walls back further into those properties.
Got it.
Here we've got a pretty all new design. I mean, granted, we've got the cut-in spots that people have made. So we started with, let's put in a parkway strip, a green strip, trees. Again, if the council feels that that's excessive and they would just prefer concrete sidewalk to the back of concrete curb, we can design it accordingly also.
Yeah, I like the green, but I just wonder who's going to go out there and mow it, the road, but.
That would be the homeowner's responsibility.
Yeah, no, I know who it is. I know.
Do the residents in the between Heights and Monroe, you know, are they fully aware of what's happening and what?
Their preferences.
Once the council gives us direction how you'd like to proceed, we'll send a letter to everybody with the plans and start the conversation. The amount of money we have funded for the work is not going to allow us to do too much at a time. This is a multi-year project and will require probably several additional capital funding requests in the years to come.
So have we heard from any of the residents yet, besides the one gentleman tonight?
None has contacted us in engineering because, again, following village policy, we wanted to present it to the council first, get your feelings about it, and then take that information, and then we'll notify the residents.
Okay.
Lorraine, I mean, what I can share is that over the years at Citizen Safety, individuals along West Glen have come to Citizen Safety, some of them requesting sidewalks along that area of West Glen. So historically we have had, but I don't even know if those people still live in those homes or, you know, but we definitely at Citizen Safety have had people come and ask the question or make the statement that they want sidewalks along West Glen.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is something that's come up with still on Citizen Safety when I was on it, like I guess 5 years ago or however long it was. And I remember Chris and I went to Hackensack when they were doing the Bergen County bike plan that didn't include the entire county. It was Ridgewood and I think 12 surrounding towns. And you know, sidewalks on West Glen was kind of like a big issue for us to get in there. So yeah, I mean, I say go out to the residents and try and start the conversation and see if people really, you know, they want sidewalks, then they'll have to know how we go about it, or if they're against it, or whatever the prevailing thought of the day is, we probably have to go out and gauge that.
Yeah, I'm good with this. I've heard these comments from people would email us just as in saying that the Board of Education doesn't do enough and brought it into that sense because the kids walk down and you know, they're walking in the street. And so it's been a problem on a variety of fronts. And I've gotten emails from people that have copied me onto the superintendent and say, do something, do something, do something. It's dangerous. So I'm good. I think we should be doing this.
So the council is okay with Mr. Weatherstouser going out with a plan as presented to you, to the residents, to make them aware of it, correct?
Yeah, I like it. I like the green on it too. Just to make it looks nicer.
So everyone else is saying yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councilor Reynolds?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Once the resolution is adopted by the council, we'll clean up our plans and we'll start the notification of the residents and start the conversations with them.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you. So now our last item for discussion is endorsing the library grant. They're going out for the New Jersey State Library 2021 Round 2 construction grant. And the deadline is June 4th. It requires a 2021 resolution of support for the library project from both the library board and the village council. The board is doing, they actually did it, I guess, last night. And then they are requesting that the village council provide a resolution of support virtually identical to the one that we did in 2020. So I don't know if Mayor Newton, if you have additional information.
No, this is what, there's been a lot of research done into why the library was not awarded on the first round. The folks that did that research feel there's a good opportunity to have some, a better outcome this go around. They just need the resolution, and current resolution that the village council is endorsing the project and so this has to go with the application. So I think that we definitely should do this. We did it once before and it allows them to move forward with their application and see how we do.
I'm in favor.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay. So that's all we have to discuss.
Okay. So with that, nothing else. All right, I guess we'll go back to public comment, not to exceed 5 minutes per person.
All right, first person is Christine.
Good evening.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, name and address
Hi.
record.
Yes, good evening. My name is Christine Rush. I'm resident of 87 California Street in Ridgewood. I just wanted to clarify some conversations I was hearing about the EMS being defunded. I'm concerned about it. It's, personally, we've used the service. There are first responders who provide a vital public service and a valuable community resource. I just don't know if the residents have been apprised that there's been discussions about disbanding or firing, whatever you want to call it, eliminating the Ridgewood EMS. It's my understanding it's the largest volunteer agency in the village. And there have been, I believe, over 500 volunteers since its inception. I know that from just doing some preliminary research that there's an average of 1,600 requests for assistance per year from village residents and an average of 1,300 volunteer hours donated to the village per month. And it's interesting because, I was just curious as to who's volunteering, and upon looking into it, I mean, these are not just paramedics and police officers who are volunteering, but they're high school students, including, students at Ridgewood High School, and stay-at-home moms, engineers, business owners. These are people who, they dedicate their time to serve the village, but this group of individuals also provides a support for each other. And I find it so disheartening after what we've all been through that there would even be a conversation about essentially firing the per diems and eliminating these volunteer positions. These are people that have spent countless hours learning, studying, being tested, continuing education, trainings, volunteering at events for the village. I think we all deserve to understand more about this. We need some transparency here. It's my understanding that it's not a failing department. So, I'm questioning why this would even be, a subject of discussion. I understand that their budget is less than what they bring in per year in billings. They've really served us faithfully throughout, most recently, the pandemic. Again, they're first responders. I'm just becoming, knowledgeable about this. I'm a mother, I'm a full-time attorney. I have 3 children and a husband and a house and a dog. And, it's 11 o'clock at night. I have a trial tomorrow I'm preparing for. I really don't have, all the time in the world to keep abreast of this, but this is something that village residents need to know about. It hasn't been openly discussed. I think that we deserve to be meaningfully consulted with regarding this issue, and perhaps an independent review or study needs to be performed. I've heard you say proceed cautiously. I've been listening to the whole meeting, slow and steady, have conversations with residents. I think it's important to do that. And I would just like for the council to, also consider that there are 50 Ridgewood High School students that are a member of the Teens and Emergency Services Program. And these are students that would be completely displaced from their participation. Eliminating the EMS would eliminate that program. And, I'm eager to speak with these students about it, because I'm sure they'd be very vocal about eliminating, this service within the village. I know the older EMTs are role models for our kids, and it also provides a healthy social network for our children and our students. And we all could use more of that, right? So it just doesn't make sense to me, and I'd like to learn more about it. And I think the council would be remiss.
Christine, I'm sorry. Let me stop you because your time is out, but let me just ask, can you just do me one favor? Just stay on the line, because I'm going to give an explanation about this at the end of public comment, because you have so much wrong information, and that's not your fault. But I want to make certain that you have the correct information before you think that something is happening that's not. So just hang on.
That's the point. The information has not been.
Christine, just hang on. Just hang on the line. The time is up. So let's get to the next person, and I'll add to that at the end. Okay. So just let's go to the next person.
Okay. Next person is Scarpa.
Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Linda Scarpa, 569 Northern Parkway. I'm just finishing up basically what I started with in the first part of this presentation. And of course, it's about the EMT, which I've talked about in the last 5 sessions. My speech is really based on your YouTube, the 2021 YouTube. I'm getting this right from that video. It stated that the EMT are going to be defunded. That's what was said twice. If the EMT are defunded and leave, all of the community involvement with the EMT will vanish. Ridgewood ties, visits to school, the citizens called Vial for Life, refilling medications, and all their appearances at all the different events in the village at volunteer time. That YouTube video revealed a lot. During the same time, the YouTube video was asked a question of Mr. F. You know who he is? If he was comfortable, if you were to take out the daytime EMTs with an influx of new people, would that be a better outcome? The response from him was, oh yes, we can ask other firefighters to work out a deal and ask the other towns to help. That would result in a cost to Ridgewood that they must pay for board services, even if they showed up. The EMTs from other towns can come, but only if their town doesn't have an emergency and it affects our safety. Where is the study to prove your idea of defunding the EMT and decimating them while hiring 2 more firefighters makes the village more safe? And an increase in population, you shouldn't fire or demean or defund the 8 paid per diem EMT. Where's the upside to defund the EMT? Where will they leave? When they leave and 2 more firefighters are hired, an additional cost to the taxpayer of $180,000 plus, including calls for paid and overtime, it's clear that this will cost more to the taxpayer during a pandemic and cause stress and overtime to police and fire department. Less labor means less time for calls and more potential deaths. That's a fact. You cannot get there in seconds. People die. The loss of 39 low-cost per diem and volunteers and hiring of 2 more firefighters is a huge burden to the taxpayer facing a potential 6.1 increase. At what cost its safety? Not at the cost of decreasing first responders who barely cost anything and service the Ridgewood Village for decades. Is that what you want? I don't think so. We all do not want this. It's a bad idea with no upside other than more funding to the fire department. Table this part of the budget. Be transparent with your numbers before a disaster occurs. A disaster to the village can happen at a long-term cost to the village. I want you to think about that. Do a labor cost and safety study. Present it to the village. That's your job, to represent what is best in cost and safety to the village. This is the right thing to do. And I must say that no, I'm not speaking wrong things. These are your exact words on that video. I played it probably 50 times. I've opened all your documents. I went through them. I know my numbers. I am open to speaking to any one of you. If my numbers are wrong, please tell me. I'm open to, and that's what a prior woman called. Her and I are not alone in this. There are a lot of people in Ridgewood that feel this way. Please just be transparent with us. Show us the upside of your plan before it's shoved in your budget and we don't have an EMT, because I spoke to them. And as somebody else said, oh, maybe we should go out in the village and talk to the people. Yeah, you should. You should go out to talk to the EMT. You should go out and talk to the people that this is going to affect. It really will affect the safety in the long run of the village. And one last thing I'd like to say to Bernadette Walsh. Thank you for talking about Boys State. My 3 sons did go to that. I'm really happy that that program continues, and they both became police officers because of that. So bravo to you.
Great.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, the next person is a caller ending in 4074. Please unmute.
Hi, it's Sherry Biskin, 178 McKinley Place. I wanted to respond to the presentation tonight by the fellow who was proposing to represent the council or the town in negotiations and contract development with carriers for the 5G plan. To me, the contract is between 2 parties, the carrier and the residents, as represented by the village. And the fellow who presented tonight, I mean, clearly is very knowledgeable about the operation, and he's clearly a very good salesman. But he also clearly has the background of the carriers. He refers to everything in terms of the carrier's frame of reference and perspective. And I don't think that's a good idea in terms of representing the interests of the residents themselves. And finally, he even will be paid by fees from the carrier. He's not free. It's not free if the person you select for that position is basically has the background and the frame of reference as the other side of the contract. I think that if the council is going to select someone to represent the residents, then I think it would be worthwhile to see if you couldn't find someone who's equally knowledgeable, but who has more of a background and an expertise representing residents' interests. I think that many people hate AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, Cablevision, all of them. And so I don't think necessarily that residents' interests have always been represented properly. And I would urge you to see if you couldn't find an attorney with more of a background on the resident side. I would think you could contact the Board of Public Utilities or various consumer organizations, either state or federal. But I can't imagine that there are not attorneys with comparable telecom background, but more of a sense of the resident's perspective rather than the carrier's perspective. So I hope you will consider looking at other candidates. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
All right, next caller is Denise. Please unmute.
Good evening, Denise. Name and address for the record.
Hi, Denise Lima, 319 East Glen Ave. I just wanted to continue to talk about moving the bus terminal, which sounds like everybody is against it. That just leaves us with the issue still of bus safety. And I was wondering if, Chris, in talking to the DOT, if we might not be able to get a study from them about how many people are actually using the bus. I've watched in the mornings the 6-7 buses that congregate during the rush hour time. And I'd have to tell you that, if there's 5, I'll even say 10 people on the bus, and that's really, an extreme, I would be really surprised. And I don't understand why we have so many buses coming through. Could we not look at reducing the amount of buses that are coming through, and the DOT should be able to give us those statistics to make an informed decision. 2, as the officer mentioned, Ridgewood Ave is certainly, the width is not conducive for the buses. They are constantly over the lines. The bigger cars we buy to park, the harder it is for them. Why can't we just reroute them to Franklin to Walnut and get them off of Ridgewood Ave altogether? So it's Maple to Franklin and then to Walnut. And that'll avoid Ridgewood Ave altogether. So just rerouting, and I didn't hear that as an alternative in the discussions at all. So I would ask, for those 2 things. And the other thing that was not mentioned is, in and of itself, the move over to the West End, for all the reasons, Mayor, that you mentioned, I think you need to look at, well, what are we doing with the Franklin Ave corridor? What are we doing with the bicycle lanes? What are we doing with the extra traffic that'll be coming out of development at the light before they go into the trestle? I don't think you can make the decision by itself. I think all of those things need to be factored in. And the last thing was about West Glen Ave. So I appreciate the sidewalks, and everybody mentioned the speed at which people are coming down the hill and then under the trestle, past Oak Ave, getting to the light at Maple. The other concern I have with that intersection of Maple and West Glen is, at some point, as you're coming down the hill approaching the light, you can make the left-hand turn onto Maple to Hohokus. Now, the dotted lines start very close to the intersection. So maybe you can get 2 or 3 cars backed up to make the left. What I'm seeing people doing in the morning is they're stacking up, starting at Oak, going over the yellow line to get to that left-hand turn signal. Now, oncoming traffic is coming up from East to West Ave on Glen, and now there's oncoming traffic ready to hit one another. So you have the speed of people reaching Maple, people are crossing over the lines, and oncoming traffic is coming up. I think that's another area niche that you need to look at as another, kind of very unsafe area, an intersection within the town. And that's all I had. Thank you for staying up so late and all that you guys do.
Denise, great observations. Thank you for calling in.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
And we have no others.
Good. So we're going to close public comment, and we're just going to, I'm first going to respond to Sherry, just so Sherry understands, this is about the small nodes that are going to go up onto the telephone poles, and this is protecting the village from, and making sure that we get paid properly those small nodes or those antennas will be there. No matter what, they'll likely come in, and we're just protecting the village interest in monetizing that as well. In terms of the EMS EMT program, a couple of things. The volunteer EMTs are not going anywhere. The volunteer EMTs will continue as a robust program. We've had an opportunity to speak to Chief Severia, who is the chief of the EMS EMT program. He assures us that the volunteer EMT program will continue, will be robust, and will continue to grow. And we look forward to that. This is a very serious public safety issue, one that this village council is taking seriously. There were multiple occasions where the EMTs at Douglas Place, a delayed response, and I'm being very careful here. These are personnel matters, but a delayed responses resulted in the Ridgewood Fire Department EMTs, our firefighters who are also EMTs, had to respond to calls. These were emergency medical calls that were not responded to. And Chief Van Gore made a determination that public safety is job one. And we as Village Council are taking this matter very, very seriously. So we can assure everyone, and Christine, is that her name? Christine, that the volunteer EMT program will continue. And many of the older longtime EMTs will continue as role models. And we're comfortable moving forward that this is in the best interest of our residents during the day when these problems occurred. So, if there are any additional questions, Christine is welcome to email me directly, and we'll make sure she gets directed to the proper responses. So in any event, with that, I guess we'll take a motion to go into closed session.
Be it resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that the Village Council meet in closed session on April 28th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter on the agenda can be reached, and that said closed session be held via Zoom teleconferencing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And be it further resolved that the matters to be discussed in closed session are limited to legal matters to include update on Green Acres diversion, Penchera versus Ridgewood Water, and Remington versus Village of Ridgewood, and personnel matters to include boards and committees, OPMA, and social media violation. These matters are allowable under NJSA 10:4-12 et sec. Be it further resolved that the minutes of this meeting shall be made available to the general public when such matters have been deemed completed by resolution of the Village Council. I have a motion?
Move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Good night.
Night, Donna. Thank you.